The man's four limbs were tightly locked to the bed by icy chains. Pale blue moonlight slipped in through the window cracks, shining on his body covered in marks. What slid down his face could no longer be distinguished as sweat or tears. He kept shaking his head, desperately refusing, wanting to end these hellish days. But the next second, his jaw was clamped in a strong grip. That low, cold voice pressed down its anger. "What are you thinking? Trying to run again?" The moment the words fell, tears of humiliation spilled directly from the corners of his eyes. Clatter, clatter, as the chains rattled. His voice grew even hoarser, even more tremulous. "Hey, I beg you, don't go on." Kwon Hyeseo had trapped him in this cramped bedroom. He pinned him beneath his body and punished him mercilessly, all because he wanted to escape from him. A flash of madness and a possession so deep it turned black flickered in Kwon Hyeseo's eyes. "You still haven't given up?" he questioned coldly. "You can't get away. I told you I won't let you go." Yet when he saw him crying so hard his body shook, Kwon Hyeseo still felt a stab of pain in his chest. He raised his hand to wipe away the tears at the corner of his eye, but the other dodged him with clear disgust, leaving only stifled whimpers pressed against his ear. Kwon Hyeseo only felt more irritated, more inflamed, and his movements grew even more out of control. Only when he heard a cry of pain did Kwon Hyeseo slow down, though his voice was still edged with agitation. "Why are you crying?" He closed in. "Just thinking about it scares you? You hate being with me every day. Hate it so much you cry? Does it feel like hell?" Still no response. Kwon Hyeseo grabbed the back of his neck in one go, his movements turning completely rough. "Even that was useless. I'd advise you to just endure it. You know it yourself." Suddenly, Kwon Hyeseo's gaze became terrifying. Like a wolf that had been hungry for a long time, he stared fixedly at him. "Because all of this you brought upon yourself." 8 years ago, Kwon Hyeseo lost his mother and was sent to live with his foster parents. And from then on, he never felt warmth again. He ran up to the rooftop again and again, looking down from the edge. Everyone said it was just a trick to get attention. He only wanted to use this method to force that person to show up, the one who watched him from the shadows and was always the first to call the police every time. And also the one who secretly sent him birthday presents and cards every year. Those so-called foster parents were only there to collect the child support that person wired every month. He was like a tree without roots. On his 19th birthday, the gift was once again snatched away by his foster mother. The moonlight outside the window was soft, quietly spreading into the room. Kwon Hyeseo stared blankly, fixing his eyes on the card in his hand. Who exactly is he? The person who had been sending child support to his foster parents for 10 consecutive years. Cha Taekyung. Kwon Hyeseo stared at the remitter's name, his gaze sinking bit by bit. Cha Taekyung. Suddenly, he saw the opened gift box beside him. There was also 7 summers placed on the bed. It was a bright red scarf. He pressed the scarf to the tip of his nose and gently took a sniff. He put on the scarf, and in the next second, he smashed everything in the room. He lit a match, listening to the sound of the picture frames shattering under his feet. A satisfied smile slowly appeared on his face. So, why bother coveting someone else's things? As soon as he finished speaking, the match in his hand burned even brighter. Since that person refuses to show up, then force him out. When Kwon Hyeseo was pulled out from the surging flames, he was already completely unconscious. In the crowd, that man froze in place, watching helplessly as the boy on the stretcher was pushed toward the hospital. The man sat by Kwon Hyeseo's hospital bed for a long time. After confirming that his condition was stable, he stood up, ready to leave. But in the next second, the boy suddenly reached out and clamped tightly around his wrist. Kwon Hyeseo was gripping so hard, and although the room was oppressively dim, his eyes were shining with a frightening brightness. "You are Cha Taekyung, right?" Looking at the man in front of him, Kwon Hyeseo's memories were yanked straight back to that fire from his childhood. His mother died in the flames, while he was carried out by a man. In the surging blaze, that man's back was stained a large patch of red with blood. Could it be that was his father? Click. Cha Taekyung hadn't expected that they would meet again in this way. In the end, he still sat back down in silence, forcing his emotions down and trying his best to talk to him calmly. On the surface, Kwon Hyeseo was excessively composed. Staring at the man opposite him, the first thing he asked was his age. After hearing the answer, 28 years old, the doubt in Kwon Hyeseo's eyes deepened. Even more, only 9 years older than himself, so it was impossible for him to be his father. Then what exactly is our relationship? Cha Taekyung's answer left him stunned on the spot. Would someone who has nothing to do with you pay child support every year and even send birthday presents? If we clearly have no connection, Why are you doing all this? All of his questions were stuck in his throat. Cha Taekyung's tone remained calm as he said that he used to sponsor an orphanage, and now he had only gotten to know Kwon Hye-seo through one-on-one sponsorship. And he emphasized again, there was absolutely no relationship between them. Unconsciously, Kwon Hye-seo tightened his grip on the cup in his hand. Then what about the rooftop? Every time I went up to the rooftop, wasn't it always you who called the police? Yet Cha Taekyung's expression was excessively calm. I don't know what you're talking about. Aside from financial support, I haven't done anything for you. I don't even know what you look like. At the very moment his words fell, however, a trace of sadness flashed through his eyes. Cha Taekyung stood up and forced a smile at the corner of his lips. Are you disappointed? Sorry. The world doesn't revolve around you. I support you, but I don't want to have any private contact with you. However, I will support you until you graduate from university. Looking at the silent boy in front of him, Cha Taekyung turned around and raised his hand to pat him on the shoulder. I've already paid all the medical expenses here in full. Once you finish the examination, you can be discharged. Just as he was about to leave, Kwon Hye-seo called out to him again. Could you let me see your back? He felt an uncontrollable, intense curiosity about that man. So he used the most extreme method to force him to show himself. When he saw the man's bare back, an indescribable sense of loss suddenly welled up from the bottom of his heart. Kwon Hye-seo himself didn't know what he had been expecting. When his only friend came to see him, he asked her if she liked him. After all, Kwak Eun-sung had taken care of him throughout the entire third year of high school. She looked utterly shocked and asked if he'd fried his brain from the fever. Hearing this very Kwak Eun-sung kind of response, Kwon Hye-seo still felt that something was off. Someone who couldn't go to college because of her mother's serious illness and inability to afford it suddenly managed to pay for the surgery and stayed by his side every day. When Kwon Hye-seo asked her how she'd managed the money, her expression suddenly stiffened for a moment. The doubt in Kwon Hye-seo's eyes instantly deepened. He deliberately knocked over the bottle of water she had just opened, spilling it directly onto her clothes. When she turned around to ask the nurse for a new hospital gown, Kwon Hye-seo's gaze locked tightly onto the wardrobe, onto the coat in which her phone was kept. Back home, Cha Taekyung tore off the silicone fake skin on his back that covered the burn. By then, Kwon Hye-seo had already gone through all of his and Kwak Eun-sung's chat logs. He stared at the words in the chat window. Kwon Hye-seo's gaze gradually sank, but the corners of his mouth slowly curled into a smile. Liar. Cha Taekyung had just changed into a bathrobe and sat down on the sofa with a glass of wine. He frowned and rubbed his temples. He was really exhausted, so tense that his head was aching. It wasn't that he had never thought he would see Kwon Hye-seo again one day, but he never imagined it would be in this way. He had thought Kwon Hye-seo was staying somewhere safe, with no worries about food or clothing. Yet that expression told him, had he missed something? Cha Taekyung lowered his eyes and looked at the bluish handprint on his wrist. The last time they met, Kwon Hye-seo had still been so small and thin. Now he'd grown this much, and yet Cha Taekyung had no confidence at all whether he could keep hiding it next time. He had just made up his mind. He would have no further entanglement with Kwon Hye-seo. But in the next second, a message from Kwak Eun-sung came again. Kwon Hye-seo had fallen from the rooftop and was badly injured. He could only drag his exhausted body and rush to the hospital once more. The moment he got out of the car and looked up, his whole body froze. Kwon Hye-seo was right there on the rooftop, staring straight at him. He shook his phone as if showing off, and that one line, "Got you?" made Cha Taekyung understand everything in an instant. Kwon Hye-seo walked toward him, that same smile still hanging at the corner of his mouth, digging into me behind my back, following me around, and on the surface still pretending to be some kind of philanthropist. Then he actually even said with a smile, "The world doesn't revolve around you. Uncle, you're really funny. Don't tell me you're an actor." Faced with Cha Taekyung's pale, stumbling explanation, Kwon Hye-seo merely scratched his head, as if too lazy to press the issue. This was as far as it went anyway. He wasn't going to believe another word. Then he lifted his phone. "Your choice. Either you come with me to the station for stalking a minor, or..." Seeing that instant of panic on Cha Taekyung's face, the curve of Kwon Hye-seo's mouth deepened. "Take me away." Cha Taekyung took him back home and reminded him not to go into any other rooms and not to mess with his things. But Kwon Hye-seo just acted like they were really close. He agreed offhandedly, but in one breath threw out a whole pile of questions about Cha Taekyung. Cha Taekyung, head aching, raised his hand to press at his temple. The next second, he suddenly leaned in close to Kwon Hye-seo's face, his tone cool but carrying a faint pressure. "One more thing, toward me." You're not allowed to have any curiosity. If you want to live here, don't cross the line. This sudden seriousness caught Kwon Hye-seo off guard for a moment. But when he spoke, there was still a hint of playfulness in his voice. Got it. Why are you being so serious? As soon as he finished speaking, he saw Cha Tae-kyung turn around and walk out the door. In the spacious room, only Kwon Hye-seo was left alone. He walked over and sat down on the sofa, but his gaze suddenly fell on the cup on the table. He picked up the cup and brought it to his nose for a light sniff. Was this the one that person drank from? He lightly licked the rim of the cup with the tip of his tongue, then swallowed a mouthful. A strong bitterness instantly exploded across his tongue. It choked him so much that he covered his mouth and coughed hard. When he finally recovered, a faint flush had risen on his face. Yet at the corners of his mouth, a trace of satisfied smile slowly spilled out. It had already been 3 days since he came to this house, but Kwon Hye-seo still hadn't seen that man again. Every time before going out, the man would put living expenses on the table in advance, as if he were deliberately avoiding Kwon Hye-seo. Why? Kwon Hye-seo had gone into his room, wanting to find some clues, but didn't discover anything special. If there was anything that felt off, it was that a man like him actually had a book of fairy tales on his bookshelf. As Kwon Hye-seo flipped through it, a sheet of paper suddenly fell out of the book. Tae-kyung, happy birthday. The tone of this long sheet of paper was almost identical to that of the birthday card. Could it be that he was imitating the person who wrote that card? Who on earth is he trying to copy? What is that man expecting Kwon Hye-seo to do? My thoughts hadn't yet settled when the sunlight on my body was suddenly blocked, casting a layer of shadow over me. Kwon Hye-seo looked up at the newcomer, yet his tone was unusually calm. Long time no see. All feelings of heart fluttering usually begin with curiosity, and that man seemed to pack every contradiction into a single person. Toward him, Kwon Hye-seo developed an intense curiosity. He even bribed Kwak Eun-song, having her look after Kwon Hye-seo and, in the meantime, keep an eye on what was going on with him. Kwon Hye-seo knew that calling the police would be useless, yet this very threat of calling the police just happened to work on him. What he truly hated was the act of calling the police itself, not the punishment, because he didn't want his relationship with Kwon Hye-seo to be exposed. So whether it was financial support or surveillance, he could only do it secretly. But if he were only afraid of that, he could clearly have just stopped paying attention. Indifferent concern, lukewarm love, hypocritical kindness, sincere lies. All of this tangled Kwon Hye-seo into a mess, and what surged up right after was anxiety. He looked calmly at Kwak Eun-song, not at all surprised by her appearance. He even calmly accepted her apology and, from her mouth, clearly learned the entire cause and effect of the matter. She was willing to be friends with him only because Cha Tae-kyung had helped her settle her mother's surgery fees. When she, with genuine sincerity, said she wanted to pull him up as a friend, Kwon Hye-seo still refused the suggestion to go live at her home. But his heart still warmed slightly. He knew very well the situation of Cha Eun-song's family. Besides, he also wanted to get a little closer and learn more about this man, Cha Tae-kyung. He stared at the message sent by his adoptive mother on his phone. Kwon Hye-seo's eyes dimmed, and what was worse, these people knew the address of Cha Eun-song's home. And for the sake of the child support money in Cha Tae-kyung's hands, his adoptive parents would definitely try every means to drag him back to that cold home. He directly blocked his adoptive mother's messages, sighed, and walked out of the elevator. As soon as he looked up, he saw a strange man standing at the door. Puzzled, he entered the passcode on the lock in front of the man, but because he was distracted, he pressed the wrong numbers. Just as he was about to re-enter it, his wrist was suddenly grabbed by the man. The man's eyes were full of vigilance, and in his cool voice there was an obvious note of threat. "Kid, don't go barging into someone else's home." Kwon Hye-seo frowned in displeasure. This wasn't someone else's home, but the man only tightened his grip on his hand. With a hint of mockery, he asked if he was a lying high school student, if he had run away from home. Just as the man was coldly threatening to send him to the police station, Cha Tae-kyung appeared. He called out, "Daiwon," and the man's expression instantly softened, but the strength of his grip did not relax at all. "Tae-kyung, you're here?" That form of address, exactly the same as on the scrap of paper, made Kwon Hye-seo's body tremble involuntarily, and the questions in his heart grew heavier. When he heard this, Cha Tae-kyung realized he had mistaken Kwon Hye-seo for a thief, and couldn't help rubbing his forehead with a sigh. "Han Jae-won, let him go. I know him." Rubbing his sore wrist, Kwon Hye-seo caught a word in Han Jae-won's remark. A person familiar with the case? As if sensing that Kwon Hye-seo was too sharp, Cha Tae-kyung's gaze at him held a few more shades of hesitation. "I only felt sorry for him, That's why I took care of him. I'll have him go back right away. Don't overthink it. Kwon Hyeseo's gaze suddenly froze, watching the two of them talk with a familiarity that needed no explanation. His expression grew darker and darker, as if realizing that with Kwon Hyeseo present, some things were inconvenient to say. Cha Taekyung simply suggested they go out and talk. Before leaving, Cha Taekyung shot Kwon Hyeseo a warning look. And you? Hurry up and go inside. Don't wander around outside in the middle of the night. Kwon Hyeseo looked at the man beside Cha Taekyung, who waved at him to say goodbye. Kwon Hyeseo did not respond. Instead, the corners of his lips curled into a sickly, icy smile. The room was once again left with only him, and he could no longer suppress the fire in his chest. Who on earth is that kid? He remembered Cha Taekyung's. Let him go back. His molars tightened unconsciously. Let him go back? They hadn't even asked him. There was no way he could ever go back to a place like that. Even if he died, he would not go back. In his memory, his mother's embrace had once been warm. Yet the young Kwon Hyeseo was fostered in a church. He desperately longed for his mother to stay by his side forever. That day, she came with his favorite cake. She said she would not abandon him. The flames crackled and leapt. In the fire, he seemed to see his mother's crazed, laughing face. Stay with mom forever. When Kwon Hyeseo woke up, his eyes still held the great fire that would not disperse no matter what. He had actually fallen asleep without realizing it. It was already past midnight, and Cha Taekyung still hadn't come back. Stepping in the cold moonlight, he was shivering. Even his fingertips were icy. He himself could not say why he had come out, but he did not want to stay there any longer. As long as he was alone, that dream would crawl out. Turning around the corner of the alley, he saw those two people. Both of their faces were flushed. Kwon Hyeseo almost instinctively hid in the shadows, but his gaze just would not move away. It was so late, what were they doing? Until he saw with his own eyes. Those two were holding each other, kissing. What had originally been financial help offered in good faith had unexpectedly brought a wolf into the house. 8 years later, he actually ended up being locked in a room by the little wolf cub he had sponsored himself. Cha Taekyung came in, rubbing at the reddened, swollen corner of his lip. Seeing that Kwon Hyeseo was still awake, he clearly froze for a moment. He had just opened his mouth, about to explain what happened last night. But Kwon Hyeseo went straight back to his room and shut the door. Kwon Hyeseo told Kwak Eun-sung about him being gay. Seeing her looking so worried, asking whether that man would go into heat over him. Kwon Hyeseo's face, however, burned even hotter. Someone like Cha Taekyung. Would he even go into heat? He simply couldn't picture it. If Cha Taekyung did go into heat, what would he be like? Whatever Kwak Eun-sung said afterward, he couldn't take in a single word. His mind held only that face. All of a sudden, Kwon Hyeseo's gaze stopped short. By the time Kwak Eun-sung finished talking with an acquaintance and came back to herself, he was already gone. Kwon Hyeseo was desperately running home. His face was still flushed, and his breathing was a mess. Only when he had locked the door behind him did his legs give out, and he collapsed to the floor. Why would his adoptive mother come here? Kwon Hyeseo was both helpless and anxious. This place was clearly far from their old home. How on earth did she find out he was here? He sat down on the sofa. There was a trace of coldness in Kwon Hyeseo's eyes. He stared straight at the man who was fixing his collar. Could it be that he was the one who snitched? Could it be that he already knew the house was burned down by Kwon Hyeseo, so he wanted to hand him over before things got out of control? How much did he actually know? What is he plotting right now? He sensed that scorching gaze. Cha Taekyung looked over at him in confusion. Do you want to say something? Kwon Hyeseo immediately turned his head away and hurriedly said it was nothing. Looking into his eyes, Cha Taekyung's doubt only deepened. Your adoptive parents contacted me. They asked if you were here. Why haven't you called them? He kept listening to him, urging him to reply to their messages, urging him to go back to that home. Kwon Hyeseo clenched his fists, his emotions finally slipping out of control. Damn it. Has he gone crazy from wanting to have sex? Cha Taekyung froze for a moment, staring at him in astonishment. A heavy, brooding aura pressed around Kwon Hyeseo as he spoke through gritted teeth, telling Cha Taekyung with resentment, there's no need to worry that him being here will interfere with you and your lover getting intimate. He stared at the man in front of him and said decisively, don't even think about driving me away. Just take him home directly, whether it's kissing or going to bed. If someone sees you two outside, wouldn't that be even more troublesome? Cha Taekyung's confused expression only made him more upset inside, and his gaze gradually darkened. Could it be that he actually wanted others to see this? Cha Taekyung lowered his eyes, forcibly suppressing his anger. This is ridiculous. I have no idea what's going on in your head, but there's nothing like that between Daewon and me. and you have no right to say that. After speaking, Cha Taekyung once again assumed the posture of an elder and warned him in an icy voice. If you have time to think about this, why don't you think about your future? Don't tell me you plan to live in my house for the rest of your life. For your own sake, think it through. What are you going to do from here on? Listening to the man's calm tone, Kwon Hye-seo's gaze on his back grew even darker. How can you be so self-righteous? I'm this uneasy, this anxious, and yet you're not shaken in the slightest. He suddenly had a strong urge to ruin that proud face, to tear off that mask of calm and see what Cha Taekyung really looks like. He reached out and grabbed Cha Taekyung by the collar in one swift motion. He pushed him down directly. If I can't have you, then I'll make sure you can't avoid me anymore. The chill in Kwon Hye-seo's eyes made Cha Taekyung feel an instant pressure. Cha Taekyung hadn't even reacted yet when a kiss fell on his lips, clumsy and trembling. Cha Taekyung turned his head to the side and dodged his kiss. There was hesitation on his face. What do you think you're doing? Move. Kwon Hye-seo stayed completely still, instead staring at him intently. You brought me here? Wasn't this exactly what you wanted? Seeing the confusion on his face, Kwon Hye-seo simply brought up how he had taken her home without permission. As soon as the words left her mouth, she leaned her whole body toward Cha Taekyung, their noses almost touching, cutting off what he was about to say. Don't give me that crap about just wanting to help. I know you're not that kind of person. Looking at his frozen expression, Kwon Hye-seo pressed in on him step by step. You don't even want to pretend anymore. So why are you still lying? Cha Taekyung clenched his fists, pushed her away and tried to sit up. What you think has nothing to do with me. I really never thought about wanting anything in return. You just need to stay put for a few days, then go back home. Before he could finish, Kwon Hye-seo grabbed his collar again and kissed him. He shoved with all his strength, but couldn't break free from the wolf cub that had gone crazy pouncing on him with kisses. The corners of his lips still carried the lingering numbness from where her fingertips had pressed. Cha Taekyung finally reached his limit. A sharp slap crashed down along with an angry shout. I told you to stop. He stared at that face, swollen and red in an instant. A flash of shock swept across Cha Taekyung's face. The next second, his expression turned completely dark as he raised his hand and gripped his tie in a death-like hold. Watching him storm out, Kwon Hye-seo neither chased nor tried to stop him. He knelt weakly in the living room, and from that day on, Cha Taekyung never came home again. Using lack of money as an excuse to see him, he reached out, but Cha Taekyung only told him coldly to just swipe the card in the drawer. Kwon Hye-seo didn't want to let their connection be cut off like this, and kept deleting and rewriting that apology over and over. It was clearly his fault, yet it was also because Cha Taekyung was always trying to drive him away. Suddenly, out of the corner of his eye, he caught sight of the Christmas promotion beside him. His fingertip rubbed the expensive price tag on the scarf. Given his situation, he was actually still thinking about buying a gift. Before leaving, his eyes immediately settled on that tie. He imagined how Cha Taekyung would look wearing it, and his face quietly flushed red. He carried the gift box that held the tie. Seeing the lights on at home, something in his heart was gently stirred, a faint expectation rising within him. When the elevator stopped and wouldn't move on the 20th floor, he simply turned around and took the stairs. His hurried footsteps clattered as he went. He only wanted to be a bit faster, to get back before that person left. Panting heavily, he pushed the door open, still carrying the expectation he hadn't had time to put away. But his smile froze in an instant. Sitting in front of the man was, unexpectedly, his adoptive mother. Even after something like that had happened, he still longed to see Cha Taekyung first. When Kwon Hye-seo, full of expectation, walked up to the man, he just happened to see the adoptive mother he hated the most instead. His knuckles clenched so tightly they turned white. Kwon Hye-seo sat on the chair, not saying a single word, looking at the woman speaking of concern with such a fake expression. She even used calling the police as a bargaining chip to force him to pay for the burned house. It was only when Cha Taekyung took the initiative to say he would compensate all the losses that her expression finally softened. In order to get more child support, the woman deliberately emphasized the fact that Kwon Hye-seo had run away. Cha Taekyung actually took her concern seriously and turned to sweep a cold gaze over Kwon Hye-seo. When your foster mother leaves, I'll have a proper talk with you, Hye-seo. Cha Taekyung maintained the same posture as before, barely moving at all. The fire at your foster parents' house. Were you the one who set it? Kwon Hye-seo instinctively gripped his backpack even tighter. He lifted his head and stared straight at Cha Taekyung. What if I say it was me? With a vexed look, Cha Taekyung pressed his hand to his forehead. Why would you do something like that? That was your home. The word home stabbed into Kwon Hye-seo's heart like a needle and also provoked his rebelliousness. Precisely because it was my home, I could deal with that house however I liked. Only then did Cha Taekyung look at him seriously. That wasn't just your house. If you do this, where are your family supposed to live? Family? What a ridiculous word. That bunch of people who took his money, are they even worthy of being called family? Cha Taekyung's expression instantly froze, filled with astonishment. Kwon Hee-seo turned his eyes to look at him, a rebellious yet lazy chill in his gaze. All the money the uncle sent had gone into her pocket. Right now, there isn't even 10 won left in my bank book. But Cha Taekyung said it was because Kwon Hee-seo was still a minor, and his family was just saving it for him. Even when Kwon Hee-seo said that even the gifts he'd given himself had been taken away by her, Cha Taekyung still felt that there must be a reason for the way the other side acted. He even wanted Kwon Hee-seo to go over and apologize to them. With his psychological defenses being shattered bit by him, Kwon Hee-seo's hand uncontrollably clenched into a fist. There was suppressed unwillingness in his voice. I'm about to become an adult. I can decide for myself where I go. I will never go back to that home. Cha Taekyung saw that stubborn streak in his eyes. His tone unconsciously cooled a few degrees. Yeah? Then you'll have to go to prison. Kwon Hee-seo froze for a moment and looked at him in astonishment. Cha Taekyung's expression was serious. For an adult, arson is as serious as murder. He added another line. If a report is really filed, besides compensation, you'd have to serve at least 3 years in prison. A trace of hesitation surfaced on Kwon Hee-seo's face. Are you going to report it? Uncle, why would you do that? Cha Taekyung only said, I only want you to be safe and sound. As for everything else, I don't care. Kwon Hee-seo lowered his head and fell silent. Cha Taekyung kept his eyes down and continued lecturing him. You have to get used to your current adoptive parents. Kwon Hee-seo suddenly raised his head, hostility radiating from his whole body, his emotions slipping out of control bit by bit. What do you know? You don't understand me at all. You've always tossed me aside and never cared how I was doing. Do you know even a little bit about me? What gives you the right to preach to me? Even having my friends keep an eye on me, sending me gifts and money that I could never actually receive. You think this is helping me? As he spoke, Kwon Hee-seo clenched his teeth. He yanked the scarf from his neck, his voice choked with emotion. These were never what I wanted. With that, he stormed straight out the door. After leaving, Kwon Hee-seo immediately went to look for part-time jobs. Because after paying the Gashawon rent with the money Cha Taekyung had given him, there was almost nothing left, so he had no choice but to work 2 or 3 jobs at the same time. His body was exhausted, but his heart actually felt much lighter. Maybe this is what he should have done from the very beginning. Relying on a complete stranger, the kindness he received from there always felt unsettling. Rather than living while watching someone else's mood, it would be better to live alone. He hardened his heart. He would no longer count on his adoptive parents, nor on Cha Taekyung. But when he was getting food for the cat and pulled out that card, the handwriting of Cha Taekyung on the card made him freeze on the spot. So all along, he had been completely on his own. He forced all his emotions down, yet still couldn't stop himself from crumpling the card. He stood up, but there was even more weariness and dejection on his face. He was clearly just returning to how things had been in the first place. From now on, as long as he kept going like this, living alone, that would be enough. Unable to find Kwon Hee-seo, Cha Taekyung simply went and blocked Cha Eun-sung's path to work. Cha Eun-sung's attitude was frighteningly cold, but she also said, Kwon Hee-seo has not been doing well at his adoptive parents' home. Cha Taekyung was clearly stunned, and with one rhetorical question from Cha Eun-sung, he fell completely silent. Hee-seo is doing very well, even if Uncle isn't by his side. If Uncle is really worried, then don't send him back anymore. Keep him here. On the way back, Cha Taekyung was completely dejected. Kwon Hee-seo should have the freedom to choose his own life. He shouldn't have interfered from the very beginning, but without realizing it, he crossed the line. This is where it should end. He had already done his best. Ending it now was the best choice. But when he passed through a congested downtown street, his gaze shifted, and he actually caught sight of Kwon Hee-seo running past. He still couldn't hold himself back and got out of the car to chase after him. There were still red, swollen marks on Kwon Hee-seo's face. 2 hours earlier, a store clerk had falsely accused Kwon Hee-seo of stealing liquor from the shop. The other party refused to listen to any explanation and raised a hand to slap him. Because he was working, he couldn't fight back. But when that man tried to snatch away his card, Kwon Hee-seo completely lost control and suddenly shoved him hard to the ground. The bottles of liquor behind you also shattered all over the floor, and when he saw blood dripping from the man's hand, he turned and ran. But the man's insulting words still echoed over and over in his ears. Bondage, imprisonment, and endless humiliation. Yet the person beneath him just happens to be the one he likes the most, the the one who had clearly long since entered his heart. But he still wants to selfishly run away, to take back everything he once gave. Kwon Hye-seo can only lock him up, make him stay by his side for a lifetime until death. Make it so that his eyes can only hold him. Looking at the trembling Cha Tae-kyung before him, the madness in Kwon Hye-seo's eyes deepened, and he murmured like passing judgment. This is all your own doing. A fire in his childhood turned Kwon Hye-seo into an orphan. In his memory, there was a man who pulled him out of the sea of flames. That man's back was also burned by the fire. From then on, Kwon Hye-seo was fostered in his adoptive parents' home. He knew someone had been secretly supporting him all along, but he had never met Cha Tae-kyung. His adoptive parents took everything that man had given him and kept it for themselves. This world made him feel that he had nothing left but loneliness. Like a tree without roots, he used the method of jumping off a building to force that man to show himself, because he wanted to escape that cold home and forcibly squeeze his way into that man's world. That man had clearly helped him so much, yet still lied to deny it. He even hired classmates to watch him. Kwon Hye-seo seized on this point to threaten him and took the opportunity to move into his home. That day, a man came to the house. This made Kwon Hye-seo inexplicably irritable. Hearing him say to that man that he was going to send him back to his adoptive mother's house, Kwon Hye-seo's heart grew heavier and darker. In the middle of the night, no matter what he did, he couldn't fall asleep. And when he went out, he personally saw him and that person kissing by the roadside. Kwon Hye-seo himself couldn't tell why he was hiding. As soon as he got home, he saw Cha Tae-kyung's swollen, reddened lips. He felt even more upset, and on top of that, Cha Tae-kyung was still trying to persuade him to go back to his adoptive mother's house. But Cha Tae-kyung had no idea what kind of life he was actually living. The financial support and gifts Cha Tae-kyung gave him were all snatched away by those people. He would rather die than go back. Their quarrel grew more and more heated, and Kwon Hye-seo's emotions slipped further and further out of control. Even if you bring that man home to do it, it's fine. Just don't worry about me. Cha Tae-kyung, whose relationship was being misunderstood, was slightly taken aback. He didn't pick up that topic again and only stiffly urged him to go home. The 19-year-old Kwon Hye-seo was frighteningly strong. He directly tackled Cha Tae-kyung to the ground, held him down and forced a kiss on him, clumsy and impatient. Cha Tae-kyung couldn't push him away and could only helplessly raise his hand and slap him hard across the face. Kwon Hye-seo grabbed the doorknob in one motion and, in the next second, rushed out the door. From that day on, Kwon Hye-seo never saw Cha Tae-kyung again. He began to panic, and on Christmas Day, he saw from a distance that the lights in the house were still on. With the last of his money, he bought a tie for Cha Tae-kyung. Kwon Hye-seo couldn't wait for the elevator and rushed straight to the stairs. He was afraid that if he was even a little slower, Cha Tae-kyung would be gone. He pushed the door open, overjoyed, only to be met by his foster mother's mean face. After sending the foster mother away, Cha Tae-kyung started trying to persuade him to go back. Cha Tae-kyung clearly didn't understand anything, yet still spoke in a lecturing tone as if it were only natural. In that moment, Kwon Hye-seo felt as if the whole world were abandoning him. He yanked off the scarf that Cha Tae-kyung had bought him, the one he had always treated like a treasure. After Kwon Hye-seo ran off, he never came back. Unable to reach him, Cha Tae-kyung had no choice but to go corner the student he had once bribed. Only from her mouth did Cha Tae-kyung finally learn that Kwon Hye-seo was doing very badly. All of a sudden, Cha Tae-kyung felt that he might have been wrong from the very beginning, that he should never have barged into Kwon Hye-seo's life. He was just about to pull back when he suddenly caught sight of Kwon Hye-seo rushing out of a convenience store, as if running for his life. It turned out that Kwon Hye-seo had been working part-time at the convenience store, but had been mistaken on the spot for a thief. Even more outrageous, that man even snatched away the congratulatory card Cha Tae-kyung had written for him. That card, Kwon Hye-seo had always treated as a treasure and kept close to him. At that moment, he completely lost control and directly shoved the man to the ground. But when he saw the man covered in blood, he suddenly panicked again and turned around to run. It felt as if there wasn't a single place in the city that could hold him. Kwon Hye-seo went up to the rooftop once again. This time, it was no longer to lure Cha Tae-kyung out. He truly wanted to disappear from this world. The very second he was about to jump, Cha Tae-kyung appeared again. Kwon Hye-seo hesitated for a moment. His foot slipped, and his whole body plunged downward. Cha Tae-kyung grabbed his hand and, without a trace of hesitation, jumped down after him. He even used his own body to hold him tightly in his arms and shield him. Just like in that fire 11 years ago, he once again put himself at the very front. Kwon Hye-seo suddenly understood. He probably really couldn't live without Cha Tae-kyung anymore. Fortunately, The two of them landed on a tent set up for the event and barely escaped with their lives. Cha Taekyung ended up with broken arms and legs. The less seriously injured Kwon Hye-seo took the initiative to speak, saying he wanted to take care of him. He crouched down to put shoes on Cha Taekyung and even reached out to warm his feet. The next second, however, he was shaken off directly by Cha Taekyung. Cha Taekyung's tone is very cold and very solemn. There is no way they could become close. Kwon Hye-seo's gaze darkens a few degrees. You say you don't need it? Then I'll make you need it. When Cha Taekyung comes out after taking a shower, Kwon Hye-seo directly stretches out his leg and trips him, then straddles his body and lifts up his shirt, until the burn scars on his back are exposed. They are the proof that, in the fire 11 years ago, he saved him. But Cha Taekyung tries to brush it off with just one sentence. I don't know. Kwon Hye-seo doesn't argue anymore. He takes out the tie he bought for Cha Taekyung that day, with a trace of expectation still pressed in his eyes. But he still pushes him away coldly. Late at night, Kwon Hye-seo quietly slips into his bedroom and cuts every tie in his wardrobe one by one. This way, he'll have no choice but to wear the one he gave him. Looking at that tie around his neck, Kwon Hye-seo's mood is excessively good. But even after being hurt like this, he still insists on going to work. So the only option is to hide all his leather shoes. Unable to leave the house, Cha Taekyung starts looking into Kwon Hye-seo's situation over the past few years. Only then does he find out. The death compensation for Kwon Hye-seo's birth mother, along with all the support payments, were all snatched away by his foster mother. Kwon Hye-seo had attempted suicide many times, and they never cared even once. A wave of guilt suddenly crashed down on Cha Taekyung. He wanted to make it up to him, wanted to send Kwon Hye-seo to college. But this sudden change left Kwon Hye-seo stunned. If it was guilt, wouldn't a straightforward apology be enough? Cha Taekyung, at a complete loss, kept saying, I'm sorry. Kwon Hye-seo told him where the hidden leather shoes were. Then he turned around and went back to the bedroom, because this kind of straightforward him was really just too adorable. If only he would stop lying to him in the future. This was the first time Kwon Hye-seo felt that he could be happy too. Cha Taekyung had thrown everything aside to save him twice. He himself must be very important to him too, right? At the very least, he wouldn't be abandoned again. Just continuing to live with him like this seemed pretty nice. Closing his eyes, Kwon Hye-seo had a wet dream for the first time. In the next second, he actually lunged straight at him and reached out to yank down his pants. Kwon Hye-seo's face instantly burned red. Such a cold and aloof man was actually crouched beneath him, and so direct, Kwon Hye-seo was about to go crazy. He suddenly grabbed his hair and forcibly yanked him back. But Cha Taekyung had no intention of stopping at all. Until Kwon Hye-seo's body trembled and completely went limp, he finally let go. Why suddenly do something like this? Cha Taekyung's face was burning red, and even his voice carried heat. Why are you asking me? It was your dream in the first place. Kwon Hye-seo suddenly went quiet. This matter was stuck in his chest, and he just couldn't let it go. He told the contents of the dream to his only friend. What he feared most was seeing Cha Taekyung's long face again. What if he really ended up liking him? His friend said it was just an illusion caused by living under the same roof and seeing each other every day. Just treat it as a nightmare and forget it. But even so, Kwon Hye-seo still didn't dare look straight at Cha Taekyung's face. He had just walked in the door when he ran right into Cha Taekyung, and Kwon Hye-seo was so startled on the spot that he lost control of his expression. The moment that face appeared, his heartbeat went out of control too, thumping wildly. Cha Taekyung didn't notice anything wrong with him and only asked, "Did you see the piece of paper tucked in the book?" The earlier scene flashed through Kwon Hye-seo's mind. That piece of paper seemed to have been stuffed into his pocket, and later he lost it. He felt guilty for no reason, but kept a clueless look on his face and nervously asked in return, "Was that thing important?" Cha Taekyung said it was nothing, but his expression had gone frighteningly dark. He's still lying at a time like this? Kwon Hye-seo stared fixedly at Cha Taekyung's back. But for some reason, when he faced this face, it didn't seem as bad as he'd thought. Looks like his friend was right, it was just a dream. There's no way he would like Cha Taekyung. The thought had barely formed when Cha Taekyung's crutch slipped and he fell straight to the floor. Kwon Hye-seo panicked at once and rushed to Cha Taekyung's side. Just as he was about to help Cha Taekyung up, his own balance shifted first. Kwon Hye-seo instinctively shut his eyes. Yet the back of his head didn't hurt as much as he'd imagined. When he opened them, he realized he was using his arm to protect my head. The distance between them was far too close. Kwon Hye-seo's face flushed red in an instant, his mind going completely blank. He suddenly jumped up, pushed Cha Taekyung away, and turned to flee back into the bedroom. He couldn't control the shame flooding him. His body had actually reacted. This was just absurd. Cha Taekyung knocked on the door in worry, And when Kwon Hyeseo spoke, his voice was strained with forced restraint. "I'm fine, you can go." Only when the footsteps at the door slowly faded away did Kwon Hyeseo bite down on the hem of his lifted shirt, softly repeating Cha Taekyung's name as he used his hand to press down the restlessness of adolescence. When Cha Taekyung was making coffee, he kept feeling a strong gaze on his back. He turned around, only to find that Kwon Hyeseo was looking off to the side, as if nothing had happened. He turned back again, but that gaze came over him once more. Was it just his imagination? Kwon Hyeseo stared blankly at his back. This had to be a scheme. Cha Taekyung had definitely done something to him. His gaze stopped on the loose thread at Cha Taekyung's lapel. He was always so absurdly meticulous. How could he have something like that? He must have done it on purpose for him to see. Kwon Hyeseo told himself he would never fall for it. Yet his body still leaned in against his will. Kwon Hyeseo pressed his forehead to his shoulder. "Here. Right here. Wasn't the loose thread already gone, you baiting ghost?" The feeling of being pressed so close made Cha Taekyung's whole body stiffen. He unconsciously straightened up, indicating that he would do it himself. But Kwon Hyeseo only drew closer, reaching both hands toward the loose thread. "Don't move, I'll take it off for you." With just one hand, be careful not to fall. Only then did Cha Taekyung obediently cooperate. Kwon Hyeseo's gaze couldn't help falling on his face. He had never seen Cha Taekyung from this close before, which was why he hadn't known that his ears actually felt so cute to him, so soft they were nothing like Cha Taekyung at all. Holding the end of the string in his hand began slowly making circles, and I watched this movement of his. I didn't know why, but there was always an indescribable feeling in my heart, and Kwon Hyeseo's lips were almost pressed against his soft ear. Just then, the doorbell suddenly rang, cutting him off directly. A trace of impatience flashed across his eyes. He turned around and looked toward the entryway. It was the man who had come last time. The man had brought an indictment. Kwon Hyeseo's adoptive parents had embezzled the sponsorship funds and child support, and were also suspected of child abuse. He had also brought an agreement about the dispute between him and the convenience store manager. He cared a lot, wondering why Cha Taekyung would protect Kwon Hyeseo like this, and his body uncontrollably leaned forward. Cha Taekyung did not give him the chance, raising his hand and striking him directly in the chest with the cane. Ever since that night when the drunken him had forced a kiss on him, Cha Taekyung had been almost left with a psychological shadow. When the man was leaving, Kwon Hyeseo stood at the door, his gaze very cold, his whole face full of hostility. He asked the man to his face, "What exactly is the relationship between you and Cha Taekyung?" Stunned for a moment, he was instead questioned back by the man. Seeing Kwon Hyeseo frozen in place, the man patted his shoulder, as if reminding him, "If you want to know, then go ask Cha Taekyung." As soon as these words fell, Kwon Hyeseo's expression darkened a few shades again. 8 years of financial support had only resulted in bondage, imprisonment, and endless possession. He was neglected by his adoptive parents and had everything taken away from him, until he forced that man, who had been quietly supporting him all along, to appear before him. He did not know when it started, but he had developed feelings for that man that he never should have had. He wanted to be seen, to be cared about, to enter that man's heart. Yet that man pushed away his advances while kissing other men. He crossed the line and asked Cha Taekyung, "What exactly is your relationship with that person? If you're not lovers, why are you kissing?" Cha Taekyung's reply, which sounded like a joke, only drove him into greater irritation and agitation. Clearly he was cold to him like ice, yet turned around and fooled around with someone else. Kwon Hyeseo grabbed his arm in a loss of control, his voice hoarse. "Are you still going to kiss that person?" He pushed back. "Since you're not lovers, you shouldn't be doing that kind of thing." This unreasonable tantrum gave Cha Taekyung a headache, to the point he could not even eat. A single "it has nothing to do with you" made Kwon Hyeseo's face completely darken. He even wanted to break Cha Taekyung's cane and throw away all his shoes and clothes, so that Cha Taekyung could not go out to see that person, so that he could only belong to him. Cha Taekyung did not understand why he had gone crazy. When he returned to the bedroom and lowered his head, he saw that book. The teacher's voice seemed to echo right beside his ear. When he returned to the living room, Kwon Hyeseo was already gone. Kwon Hyeseo only felt so annoyed that his skin tingled. He himself had that kind of dream, and yet Cha Taekyung could still say, "It's okay." He'd finally managed to get a little closer, only to be pushed away again. He came back with his hands and feet cold. He found that Cha Taekyung had actually fallen asleep on the sofa. Was he waiting for me? No way, right? He probably wouldn't be dreaming about me, would he? Kwon Hyeseo walked up to him and lowered his voice. "Ajushi, you actually like me, don't you? Your mouth is all cold, but you've been pretending this whole time. For me, you were even willing to trade your life. You take me way too seriously." As soon as the words fell, the surroundings became frighteningly quiet. Kwon Hyeseo's cheeks flushed bright red at once. What am I doing? Confessing to someone who's asleep? Suddenly, in his sleep, Cha Tae-kyung called out Hyeseo's name in a very gentle voice. He was back in that fire again in his dream. The teacher swallowed by flames, and Hyeeseo lying unconscious beside them. The moment the glass came crashing down, he stopped caring about anything and rushed toward that small figure curled up into a ball. Cha Tae-kyung still hadn't woken from the dream, and scorching tears overflowed from his hazy eyes. In the next instant, it was as if he saw someone. Right after that, a clumsy, inexperienced kiss fell on his lips. When he saw clearly who was in front of him, he was instantly shocked numb. He abruptly turned his head to push him away, and even lifted his leg to block Kwon Hyeeseo from continuing to come closer. With shy anger, he cursed under his breath. "What are you doing? I clearly said you're not allowed to do this again." But when his gaze dropped downward, his whole body instantly went rigid. How could he be reacting to Kwon Hyeeseo? Kwon Hyeseo's eyes were burning hot. He pinned down Cha Tae-kyung's leg and pressed him, asking what he had dreamed and why he had called his own name like that. Watching Kwon Hyeseo's movements, Cha Tae-kyung's face flushed scarlet in an instant. How did he dare to do this right in front of him? He wanted to push Kwon Hyeeseo away, but his injured arm couldn't muster any strength at all. Kwon Hyeseo's whole body ached with heat. He leaned in against the side of Cha Tae-kyung's neck, begging him to call his name once more, in the tone he'd used in the dream. Fine, delicate kisses fell on the side of his neck, and his earlobe was lightly nibbled again. Cha Tae-kyung pushed at his hand but was trembling, his face blazing red as he called him by his full name. After a moment, Cha Tae-kyung simply pinched his face and pushed it away. "That's enough. Move aside now that it's over." But Kwon Hyeeseo lowered his head to kiss the back of his hand, then took hold of his wrist and kissed it again and again, taking an inch and asking for a mile as he said, "Why don't I use my hand to help you?" Cha Tae-kyung's temper flared up, completely impossible to suppress. Leaning on his crutch, he turned around and was about to leave. Kwon Hyeeseo hurriedly explained, "This is the first time, so I couldn't stop. I'll definitely do better next time." Instead, that sentence completely set Cha Tae-kyung off. "Next time? What next time? Do you still want to do this kind of out-of-control thing again?" Cha Tae-kyung couldn't figure out what had gone wrong. Maybe from the very beginning, he shouldn't have brought Kwon Hyeeseo back. He had just been thinking of finding a hotel to stay in first. As soon as he opened the door, he saw Kwon Hyeeseo standing at the entrance. He wanted to go out, but was firmly blocked by Kwon Hyeeseo. Kwon Hyeeseo walked straight into the bathroom and locked the door behind him. He stared straight at Cha Tae-kyung. A layer of near-overflowing madness pressed in his eyes. Binding, imprisonment, and endless humiliation. All just because of that suffocatingly obsessive desire to possess. Starting from that first wet dream, Kwon Hyeeseo developed feelings for Cha Tae-kyung that he should never have had. On top of that, he had kissed that man, yet treated him as coldly as a stranger. Kwon Hyeseo's jealousy began to slowly surface. In his dreams, he called his name gently, and Kwon Hyeseo's body and heart both grew restless. But when he looked at that face while he was awake, Kwon Hyeeseo could only force down his hormonal impulses with his own hands. He had originally thought that this would bring their relationship one step closer. But Cha Tae-kyung instead kept a cold face, wanting to push him even farther away. Kwon Hyeeseo could no longer suppress that impulse and directly cornered Cha Tae-kyung. He forced him down into the bathtub and almost out of control tore open his clothes. Cha Tae-kyung, flustered, tried to push him away, but all his struggles were forcefully pressed down. Clear water instantly soaked his whole body, the ambiguity so suffocating that Cha Tae-kyung glared at him in angry shame. His fingers clutched tightly at the hand that was yanking open his collar. A fleeting flash of pleasure crossed Kwon Hyeseo's eyes, even tinged with madness. In the end, Cha Tae-kyung was stripped bare by him, and the sounds coming from behind made him tremble with humiliation. Only giving up resistance now, Cha Tae-kyung gripped the edge of the bathtub in a death hold, trying to force himself upright, but he was held even tighter from behind, and Cha Tae-kyung ground his teeth. In the end, "Why are you doing this?" Kwon Hyeeseo pressed close to his neck, his breath burning hot and his voice heavy with anger. "I've thought about it for a long time, and I think it's unfair. Uncle has seen me like that, but I haven't seen you like that yet." The sensations coming from his body made Cha Tae-kyung burn all over, and he pressed down his voice in a low growl. "Let go." But Kwon Hyeseo's gaze was uncharacteristically serious. Why hasn't Uncle reacted yet? Cha Tae-kyung braced himself against the bathtub with one hand, glanced sideways at him, eyes cold as a blade. I don't want to do this kind of thing with you. Nothing you do will work. I won't get aroused, because it's impossible for me to get aroused by a kid like you. Kwon Hee-seo furrowed his brows tightly, enduring so hard it made him fierce. So annoying. But the moment I hear your voice, my body just... He buried his face in the crook of Cha Taekyung's neck, as if he were the only one anxiously worked up, stabbing at Cha Taekyung's pride until it hurt. Cha Taekyung's words of refusal were cut off by his movement, his body curling up into a tight ball, still struggling desperately. He suddenly stopped making any sound, and Kwon Hee-seo's movements froze. A trace of worry unconsciously appeared on his face. Only when he saw Cha Taekyung's reaction did the corners of his mouth slowly lift into a faint smile. Is it really because it hurts, uncle? So what do we do now? Judging by this reaction, it totally is. Cha Taekyung's face burned red hot, warm tears starting to well up at the corners of his eyes. Yet his mouth kept denying it over and over. There was a hint of delight hidden in Kwon Hee-seo's tone. Don't be afraid. Even if you really are like that, uncle, I still like you. Let me see your face. Raise your head. Look at me. Can you give me a kiss? Kwon Hee-seo moved in even closer, but Cha Taekyung stubbornly turned his face to the side. His gaze unknowingly grew darker. He couldn't be bothered to hold back and directly, forcefully turned Cha Taekyung's face back, domineeringly sealing his lips. It was only when his palms suddenly felt empty that Kwon Hee-seo finally let him go. So, do you still think I'm a kid now? He had actually pinned him down like that in the bathtub. Water surged up madly, soaking through all their clothes in an instant, and he immediately tore them open, doing something that crossed the line. Ambiguity spreads like a loss of control, and reactions that shouldn't have appeared surface along with it. Cha Taekyung has no idea how it became like this. It feels like he has developed feelings for him that he shouldn't have. But the injured hand has no strength at all, and he can't push him away. The floor is a complete mess, and Cha Taekyung curls up under the blanket, trembling. Kwon Hee-seo sits by the bed, raises his hand, and directly finishes an entire bottle of mineral water. He turns his head to look at the bed. Cha Taekyung is far too quiet. He reaches out to touch Cha Taekyung's ankle, and in the next second he feels that slight tremor. He directly leans down toward him, and Cha Taekyung instinctively tries to dodge. But he immediately seals Cha Taekyung's lips again, domineering and crazed. No matter what Cha Taekyung says, he will not stop. Not until Cha Taekyung swallows the water in his mouth, down his throat, does Kwon Hee-seo slowly straighten up. His fingertip brushes past the corner of his mouth, and he gives a light lick. Do you want more? Cha Taekyung's cheeks burn, his brows and eyes clouded with shy anger. His voice taut, that's enough. Kwon Hee-seo only grows more unrestrained, that trace of possessiveness in his eyes seeming about to lose control. Really not thirsty? I'm afraid you'll get dehydrated. Even the bandages are soaked through. After saying that, he slipped under the covers, his voice much too low, carrying a sense of pressure. I'll clean you up first, then change your bandages. If you stay this wet and don't change them, it'll get infected. He completely ignored all of Cha Taekyung's struggling and refusals. Then he leaned in close to Cha Taekyung again, his tone half like a smile and half not. Ajushi, do you have feelings for me? Cha Taekyung said nothing, but Kwon Hee-seo only pushed his luck even further, his flushed face almost pressing up against Cha Taekyung's. The moment go-in was mentioned, Cha Taekyung's pupils suddenly contracted. He used all his strength to struggle and refuse, crying as he begged him to stop. But the more Cha Taekyung acted like this, the redder Kwon Hee-seo's face became. Incredibly, he cried. Was it because he had never experienced this before? Cha Taekyung lifted his arm to block his own wretched state, yet still nodded lightly. Kwon Hee-seo confirmed it over and over again, until he got the answer he wanted. His gaze went unfocused, as if sinking into some emotion. So that's how it is. Then I'm the first. Listening to the muffled sobs Cha Taekyung was trying to suppress, Kwon Hee-seo moved close to his ear, softening his voice, coaxing him. Don't cry. If Ajushi doesn't like it, I'll listen to you. But he didn't really let Cha Taekyung go, and Cha Taekyung's tears wouldn't stop. Kwon Hee-seo bent down in front of him, stared at him and said, You say you like me, and I'll let go. Forced to the point he couldn't breathe, Cha Taekyung could only cry and insincerely say that he liked him. A powerful surge of satisfaction rose in Kwon Hee-seo's heart, and he answered softly, I like you too. He buried his face in the side of his neck, his voice sounding drunk. I like you, Ajushi. I like you, Ajushi. The icy chains could lock up a person, but they could not lock up his heart. That morbid light in Kwon Hee-seo's eyes grew more and more intense. Even so, all he could do was lock the man away, making Cha Taekyung belong only to him. The first time he had a wet dream about Cha Taekyung, Kwon Hyeseo completely panicked. But the moment he saw that face, his heart disobediently began to race. And whenever he saw Cha Taekyung kissing another man, he would lose control to the point of madness. He had even thought that the relationship between the two of them had finally eased. But Cha Taekyung was still just as cold and distant, as if humoring a small child. In order to prove himself, Kwon Hyeseo forced Cha Taekyung down into the bathtub. He forced Cha Taekyung to do those shameful things. Watching Cha Taekyung cry as he refused, then being forced by him to say, "I like you," the tips of Kwon Hyeseo's ears still quietly turned red. Although it didn't really count as truly intimate yet, at least the distance between them had gotten a little closer. Early the next morning, Kwon Hyeseo subconsciously reached out to feel for the side of the bed. As soon as he opened his eyes, he saw Cha Taekyung in front of the wardrobe changing his tie. The cast had been removed, and he had actually gone to the hospital by himself. "Why didn't you call me?" Kwon Hyeseo chased after him with a barrage of questions. All that answered him was the cold slam of a door. Cha Taekyung arrived at the company and was in the middle of handing over the work he had left unfinished before. Then he received a text message from Kwon Hyeseo. Every word in the message was filled with unease, but Cha Taekyung did not reply. Kwon Hyeseo stared blankly at the phone. Clearly it showed read. Yet there was no reply. By evening, Hyeseo was waiting by the door the moment he could, fixing his gaze on that familiar face. "Why are you only coming home now? Why did you ignore my messages?" As for that perfunctory excuse of, "I was too busy," Kwon Hyeseo didn't believe a single word. He grabbed his wrist in one swift motion, blocking him completely. He leaned in a little closer and pressed him in a low voice. "Why are you avoiding me?" Cha Taekyung turned his face to the side, his tone as cold as ice. "When have I ever avoided you?" SK. Kwon Hyeseo hated this two-faced way of his the most, not even daring to meet his eyes. "If you're angry, just say it directly. Why do you have to ignore me like this?" Cha Taekyung suddenly shook off his hand, his tone laced with barely contained impatience. "Don't push people to the point of exhaustion. You're not a child." He turned and went into the study. That document still hadn't been finished. There was a sudden bang on the desk. Cha Taekyung lifted his head and ran right into that straight, unblinking gaze. His headache worsened. "Kwon Hyeseo, go downstairs." But Kwon Hyeseo just stared at him, eyes full of stubbornness, insisting on getting a reason for, "You're avoiding me." In the end, Cha Taekyung sighed and told Kwon Hyeseo to apologize for forcing him, and to promise never to do it again. Then he wouldn't pursue the matter any further and would treat it as if it had never happened. Yet all Kwon Hyeseo heard was the last sentence. "Why should we pretend it never happened?" Cha Taekyung was both embarrassed and angry, his face flushing red. "Are you asking even though you know why? I clearly refused you many times." Kwon Hyeseo suddenly lowered his voice. "Aren't you curious why I did that?" But he didn't even pause before replying, "No." Kwon Hyeseo's gaze grew serious. "It's because, if I said I like you, uncle, would that make things hard for you?" Cha Taekyung turned around and went on pretending to be clueless, explaining, "That was just mistaking dependence on a guardian for liking someone." But in Kwon Hyeseo's heart, he had never been a guardian. Kwon Hyeseo pressed both hands on the armrests of his seat, leaned in close to his face, the stubbornness in his eyes growing deeper. "I don't want to act like nothing ever happened, and I'm not going to give up on liking you, no matter whether it makes you feel troubled or not. I have to make my feelings clear. I don't want to hide it from you either. Every time I see you, I think of sexual things. Whenever I get the chance, I'll touch you and look for a chance to kiss you. If what you want is an obedient kid who never goes into heat, then you shouldn't have saved me in the first place." Those words made Cha Taekyung feel irritated. "Let's stop here. Even if you do this, it won't change anything." Cha Taekyung turned his seat to leave, but once again his wrist was brushed and caught. With his head lowered, Kwon Hyeseo spoke in a muffled voice. "I'm sorry, I forced you, but you always treat me like a child, like you've never really taken my feelings seriously." As he spoke, he lifted his eyes to him, a very sincere plea in them. "Please give me a chance. Just because I'm young, you won't even give me a chance. That's too unfair. Stop treating me like a kid. Seriously consider my feelings. Will you?" And then, just like that, Cha Taekyung was pushed down by him into the bathtub. Water soaked through his whole body, and his clothes were stripped off by him. No matter how he struggled or cried, it was useless. Cha Taekyung thought it would just end like this. Cha Taekyung curled up in the sheets, but he bullied Cha Taekyung once again, and even forced Cha Taekyung to say he likes him. Cha Taekyung's feelings were so complicated that they went numb. After that, he had already worked overtime for a whole week. He had also been staying in a hotel for a week, and being busy with work was only one of the reasons. More than that, he didn't know how to face Kwon Hye-seo. On his phone were text messages from Kwon Hye-seo. "Mister, are you avoiding me? How long are you going to hide?" Every time he saw a message from him, the ambiguous scene from that day would automatically replay in Cha Taekyung's mind. He warned himself over and over not to think about it, to forget it quickly, but no matter how he resisted, it was useless. Of all people, he had to do that kind of thing with a kid. As an adult, he was simply terrible. Kwon Hye-seo could always do unexpected things, leaving Cha Taekyung completely at a loss for how to deal with him. But if he rashly tried to talk him out of it, or suddenly hardened his attitude, what if he pushed him to the point of jumping again? Then he shouldn't suji him for now. He should first put some natural distance between them, meet less often. Maybe then he would slowly give up. When Cha Taekyung said he was busy with work, Kwon Hye-seo only replied with 3 words, "Big liar." There was simply no way to continue the conversation after that. The case suddenly came in, and Cha Taekyung was busy all the way until the afternoon before he saw the pictures sent by Kwon Hye-seo. When he opened them, they were the books and clothes he had messed up, and Cha Taekyung's anger flared up at once. This guy actually used such a childish method to force him to come back. It wasn't until dinner time that Cha Taekyung received a new message from him. Kwon Hye-seo said he had already put everything that had been messed up back in its original place. The corners of Cha Taekyung's lips lifted involuntarily, and he sent, "Thank you for tidying it up for me." Just as the message was sent, Kwon Hye-seo's call came through directly. "Instead of thanking me, why don't you come home today?" Cha Taekyung said awkwardly, "I'm very busy with work." Kwon Hye-seo pressed him on where he was going to sleep tonight and even said, "I'm home alone. What if something happens?" Only then did Cha Taekyung reluctantly give him the address and even threatened him. "If you dare come over, I'll change hotels." He thought that would be enough to scare him off. Not long after, Kwon Hye-seo's disappointed voice came from the other end of the line. "Tomorrow is Mom's death anniversary. Are you really going to leave me at home alone?" Cha Taekyung froze. "So soon already?" Suppressing his emotions, he replied, "Once I finish my work, I'll be back in the early hours of tomorrow." Kwon Hye-seo only left one sentence. "If I can't see you today, I'm not going to sleep." Listening to the busy tone on the phone, Cha Taekyung felt a wave of helplessness. He really couldn't do anything about him, so he could only rush back now and work overtime tomorrow. Just as he was about to get up and leave, he heard a colleague say, "A skeleton has been found at Migak Church." Cha Taekyung's face darkened, and he turned to look at his supervisor. "What kind of place is that?" On the drive back, Cha Taekyung's thoughts slowly began to drift. When he was a child, he was always bullied and mocked by his peers. It was a woman who drove away those annoying guys for him. Cha Taekyung wiped his bloody nose in a sorry state, and the woman took out a handkerchief and reminded him to go get treatment. Cha Taekyung had no money, but the woman said she was willing to give it to him. He asked her, "Why are you helping me?" The woman looked at him and smiled warmly. "Do adults need a reason to help children?" Later, he was pushed down into a bathtub by a boy 9 years younger than him. He had thought that humiliation was merely the work of hormones. Cha Taekyung curled up in bed, but he still couldn't escape that person's violation. He tearfully begged for mercy from the boy he had been supporting. Even after something like that happened, Cha Taekyung still did not give up on him. Only because Hye-seo's mother was the only light in his childhood. They did not spend much time together, but that teacher's handkerchief was the only kindness he had ever received. After receiving her help, Cha Taekyung only found out the next day she was the new teacher. After school, everyone else had left. Only Cha Taekyung was still there, clutching the handkerchief and pacing back and forth at the office door. It wasn't until a gentle voice sounded behind him. It was the person he had been waiting for all along. But when he looked up, he met the teacher's face. Cha Taekyung suddenly grew nervous. In the end, he failed to return the handkerchief, and even forgot to say thank you completely. But as soon as he returned to the orphanage, the older kids saw the handkerchief, and they immediately laughed at him for being a child without parents. What was worse, they even tore the handkerchief to pieces right in front of him. Tearing it wasn't enough. They even ripped it while laughing, like they were doing it on purpose for him to see. Then they turned around, joking and laughing as they walked away. Cha Taekyung gripped the scraps and sat dejectedly on the wooden bench. The teacher, as if playing around, suddenly grabbed him from behind, lifting him by the collar, her tone carrying a teasing lilt. "Little guy, you're not getting away this time. You were the one at the office door last time, right? Hurry up and tell me what's wrong, or I won't let you go." Cha Taekyung turned his red-rimmed eyes to look at her, his gaze already shimmering with tears. The teacher was startled, immediately let go of him, and apologized again and again. But Cha Taekyung's tears just wouldn't stop. "Crying," he said. The handkerchief was torn to pieces. The teacher took out a new handkerchief and said she still had many, that she could give him another new one. But Cha Taekyung only shook his head. Seeing how stubborn he was, the teacher led him over to the tree. She put the torn-up handkerchief into a box and buried it, telling him, "This is called a time capsule. Put things that are meaningful but already broken in here. Make a mark beside the tree and come back to dig it up when you grow up. That way you won't stay sad forever." Cha Taekyung came to that same tree from back then. He looked at the handkerchief in the box, both familiar and strange. The Liwal task force then drove through the night to the Liwal police station. He was going to reinvestigate the case of teacher Kwon Jong-ae. Because no one had investigated this case longer than he had, the police agreed to let him assist. And they told him, on Liwal Mountain, they had found the body of the man who disappeared 20 years ago, Kim Cheol-woo. His companion was Yong-woo, wearing a khaki jacket. Fan, 36 years old, would discover this secretly buried corpse, all because a drunken swindler let something slip. 10 years earlier, a huge sum of money had suddenly been transferred into Fan's bank account, and Kwon Jong-ae, who had always lived on Liwal Mountain, moved away after Kim Cheol-woo disappeared. But 10 years ago, she committed suicide at Miguk Church, making the case seem even more deliberately muddied. The more they investigated, the less sense it made. The two of them finally arrived at Liwal Mountain. At this moment, Cha Taekyung remembered the past. He had picked the most beautiful flowers, getting ready to give them to his teacher. He waited in the classroom until evening, only to learn from the other teachers. That teacher Kwon Jong-ae had already resigned the week before. Mount Liue was covered in snow, and the ground underfoot was so slippery it made him tense. During the investigation, the two of them came to the place where Kim Cheol-woo's body was buried, and from the officer they learned, Kim Cheol-woo died of head trauma, his whole body fractured, and this area was off limits. Cha Taekyung almost instinctively lifted his head and looked toward the higher summit. 10 years after they parted ways in elementary school, Cha Taekyung saw Kwon Jong-ae again. Her condition was clearly off, as if she were in a hurry to escape from here. Cha Taekyung still took out the letter he had written to her. He thanked his teacher for taking care of him back then, even if in other people's eyes it was so light as to be hardly worth mentioning. But to Cha Taekyung, that gentleness was crushingly heavy, and Kwon Jong-ae was also the first real adult he had ever met. No sooner had he finished speaking than tears were already streaming uncontrollably down Kwon Jong-ae's thin cheeks. "Taekyung, I'm not the good person you say I am. I've killed someone." It was as if her helpless voice still lingered in his ears. Looking down from the mountaintop, what replayed over and over in his mind were his teacher's desperate pleas. "Teacher, can I ask you a favor? Kiri is still young. I don't want him to know his mom is that kind of person. Can you keep it a secret for me?" Cha Taekyung closed his eyes on instinct. When he turned around, he saw the mark where the time capsule was buried. He dug the soil open and the secret was exposed along with it, right when the officers arrived. But he just smiled and said he hadn't found anything. Kwon Hye-seo was very disappointed, simply because Uncle couldn't come with him to see his mom. During this period, he hadn't prepared for his mom's death anniversary, because he never dared to face her death. He didn't dare face the fact that, in the end, he would be alone, as Kwon Jong-ae. But now it doesn't matter anymore because he still has Uncle. He was just about to take out his phone and call Cha Taekyung when he was suddenly stopped by a woman. "Jae, you're Hye-seo, right?" Ever since that time he was roughly pushed into the bathtub, and their sponsorship relationship was forcibly cut off. Kwon Hye-seo simply followed his body's instincts, and in the most direct, most forceful way, spoke out his feelings for Uncle. But from that time on, Cha Taekyung had been avoiding him. Kwon Hye-seo tried every possible way, just to see him once. Until his mom's death anniversary finally came. Uncle had clearly promised to come, but he still didn't show up. It was Cha Taekyung who had given him the hope that he could accept everything. But in the next second, the last voice he wanted to hear suddenly sounded behind him. When he was a child, he saw his mother crying as she knelt in front of his aunt, and he heard their hysterical screams. His aunt broke down completely and lost control, shouting at his mother to go die. Since the last time he left, it's probably already been 10 years, right? When faced with his aunt's Dudong greeting, Kwon Hye-seo didn't say a single word and turned around to leave. But she yanked his arm hard. Back then, after his mother died, she was the one who threw him straight into the institution. And now she comes to talk to him about family. suddenly saying she wants to help him. Kwon Hyeo's brow tightened sharply, his voice so cold it turned hard. "Whose family with you?" Hearing her call his name again and again, Kwon Hye-seo subconsciously clenched his teeth, as if he were forcing something down in his throat. "Because of you, Aunt. It's because of you that Mom died." The moment those words left his mouth, Kwon Hye-seo completely lost control and turned to leave, not even glancing back at the confusion of the person behind him. As the only eyewitness to the fire at Migu Church, back then they asked him, why did his mother commit suicide? Kwon Hye-seo lied and said he didn't know. He just didn't dare to admit it. At that time, his mother was still young and beautiful, yet she had to raise a child alone. How could that be easy? Because of him, his mother couldn't remarry. So his mother's death was probably his fault. Everyone around him said the same thing. Kwon Hye-seo has never been able to accept the fact that his mother left. Back in the room, he was so nervous that he bit his fingertips. Losing control of his emotions, he kept whispering over and over, "No, it's not my fault." Suddenly, his foot stepped on the remote control. News about the Aurora Motel came from the TV. The Aurora Motel had caught fire, and there were fatalities. And the uncle had been staying there recently all this time. When Cha Tae-kyung came back from Mount Ryu, he accidentally broke his phone. But he hadn't memorized Kwon Hye-seo's number, so he could only part ways with the officer in a hurry. He thought that once he got home, he would definitely explain it properly to Hye-seo. It was just that he couldn't reach him for the time being. It shouldn't cause any serious problem. But the more you fear something, the more likely it is to happen. On the way back, a blizzard triggered a landslide. The response personnel advised Cha Tae-kyung to withdraw along the original route first. The snow was still falling, and no one could say for sure when the blockade would be lifted. Outside the window, snowflakes were raging wildly, and inside the room, Kwon Hye-seo was on the verge of collapse, curled up and shivering on the icy floor. He clutched his phone in a death grip, unable to remember how many times he had called Cha Tae-kyung. But all he heard in the receiver again and again was, "The number you have dialed cannot be reached at the moment. Please try again later." He forcibly pushed the man down into the bathtub. Selfishly and stubbornly, he pressed close to him, as if clinging to the only way out. They shared a bed the whole night, yet it didn't bring the two of them even the slightest bit closer. But what Kwon Hye-seo hadn't expected was that, just as he was about to fall into despair, the uncle actually took the initiative to kiss him. He stood on the rooftop and looked down again and again. The tiny figures downstairs looked exactly like Kwon Hye-seo's future. Again and again, he thought to himself, if only Mom hadn't given birth to me in the first place. If you can't take responsibility until the very end, then you shouldn't give any hope at all. Then he wouldn't have been abandoned. When Cha Tae-kyung returned home, he found that the lights on this floor were off. As soon as he walked in, he saw Kwon Hye-seo curled up on the floor in the dark. His chest tightened involuntarily, carrying a clear note of concern. But in the next second, his wrist was suddenly grabbed. The other strength was frightening. That hoarse voice was laced with choking sobs. "Where did you go? Up to now, what have you even done?" That question made Cha Tae-kyung tremble all over. He remembered what the teacher had said and, in the end, still didn't tell Kwon Hye-seo. He wanted to pry that hand off, but then he saw the bloody scratch marks in the palm of Kwon Hye-seo's hand from his own nails. Kwon Hye-seo didn't care about the pain at all. He just lowered his voice and pressed him. "Why didn't you answer my calls? Answer me." Cha Tae-kyung's "it doesn't matter" instantly made Kwon Hye-seo so angry that his jaw clenched tight. In the next second, he grabbed Cha Tae-kyung by the collar, slammed him straight down onto the floor, and his voice was on the verge of breaking. "You asked how my hand ended up like this? It's all because of you." Cha Tae-kyung's gaze paused for a moment, but Kwon Hye-seo only smiled like he was mocking himself. "Do I look strange? That's because of you too. No matter what bad things I've done, even to the point of almost going crazy, it was all because of you, yet you don't have the slightest interest in me." Kwon Hye-seo knew very well that Cha Tae-kyung didn't care what he became. He only wished he would stop disturbing Cha Tae-kyung's life. As if his disappointment had finally piled up enough, this time he truly chose to let go, to step out of sight the way Cha Tae-kyung wanted, and never appear in his world again. But after hearing this, Cha Tae-kyung instinctively grabbed his wrist. He hurried to explain that the reason he couldn't be reached was because his phone had been broken. But Kwon Hye-seo didn't need that kind of dry explanation. He only tossed out coldly, "Since you feel guilty, then kiss me." Cha Tae-kyung froze on the spot, while Kwon Hye-seo's tears suddenly burst like a broken dam. As expected, he can't do it, right? There's no need to even think about it. What he truly wants, Cha Tae-kyung will never give. Since that's the case, he shouldn't have given him any hope from the very beginning. On her deathbed, His mother was like a flower slowly withering away. For her, death was the only release. But when she died, she also took away the last bit of light that let Kwon Hye-seo go on living. Kwon Hye-seo had long since had enough, and he suddenly flung Cha Tae-kyung's hand away. He was sick of being led around by his feelings, and sick of that kind of love he had to beg for. He would rather find a place to disappear completely, since he would be abandoned in the end anyway. Just as Kwon Hye-seo broke down and cried so hard he couldn't stop, Cha Tae-kyung suddenly cupped his face, lowered his head and kissed him. His voice pressed very low, "Calm down." That faint, soft touch at his lips made Kwon Hye-seo freeze all over in an instant. He forced his tears back down, but instinctively deepened the kiss. Cha Tae-kyung had just been about to push him away, but in the next second he was pulled even tighter into Kwon Hye-seo's arms. "Please don't push me away again. Don't let even you make me feel lonely." As he spoke, the hand Kwon Hye-seo had clenched in his collar began to tremble, shaking visibly. "If even you become like that, I'll really feel like I'm about to suffocate. I'm begging you, Ajushi. Hold me up so I can keep on living, please." The hands Cha Tae-kyung had been clenching slowly loosened, and he no longer avoided the kiss. From that first hug, to the kiss he initiated, and finally to the way their bodies drew close. It was all because of that one sentence. "Ajushi, help me live on." From sponsor and sponsored to crossing that line, in the end, Cha Tae-kyung still gave in. The first time they met, Kwon Hye-seo was still being carried on the teacher's back, wrapped in swaddling clothes. Back then, his hands were so small that he could barely wrap them around a single finger. But now, this ambiguous touch made Cha Tae-kyung feel momentarily dazed. Kwon Hye-seo thought that when he closed his eyes, it was because he didn't want to see his face. Yet even at a time like this, Cha Tae-kyung's expression was still as cold as if he had no emotions. A faint crease formed between Kwon Hye-seo's brows, and on his reddened face there was a trace of hidden sorrow. Just like he said, there was no extra foreplay, direct, clean, and simple. Cha Tae-kyung's reaction made Kwon Hye-seo pause for a second, but his gaze grew even hotter. It was as if there was a hint of satisfaction mixed in, along with an even deeper longing. The uncle who had just coldly said, "You don't need to ask what I think," was now, in this ambiguity, crying and begging for mercy. This kind of Cha Tae-kyung only made Kwon Hye-seo's heart race more. He kissed him directly, blocking all his words. Uncle really was a contradictory person. He clearly looked so strong, yet was so fragile that he might shatter at a touch. He had seemed so cold and hard to approach, yet turned out to be unbearably gentle. Kwon Hye-seo interlocked their fingers tightly and pulled Cha Tae-kyung firmly into his arms. "Why is it that you're only soft with me? Why don't you push me away? I'm obviously still young, I don't understand anything, and even my palm is a whole size narrower than his." Obviously, Cha Tae-kyung doesn't feel the same way about me, yet he keeps making me misunderstand. Makes me think there are things in this world that belong to me. It's like something is slowly taking root in his heart. Because of Cha Tae-kyung, he suddenly has a reason to keep on living. In that moment, a trace of greed sprouted in Kwon Hye-seo's heart. He gripped Cha Tae-kyung's hand more tightly, his voice carrying a plea. "Promise me you won't abandon me, that you'll stay by my side forever." After the lingering intimacy ebbed away, Cha Tae-kyung looked especially tired, his voice soft as a sigh. "I promise you, I won't leave you. I'll always stay with you." Kwon Hye-seo clearly knew Cha Tae-kyung was lying to him, yet he still chose to deceive himself, because this time, no matter what, he would never let go again. Forever. Even if it meant death, he would not let him go. The morning sunlight spilled in through the window. Kwon Hye-seo woke up, and his first reaction was to look for Cha Tae-kyung. "I'm going to work first." Only then did he notice the note left on the table before work. Leaning in to see the message clearly, Kwon Hye-seo couldn't help but curl his lips in a small pout. Pinned against the wall by a boy 9 years younger than him, Cha Tae-kyung hurriedly pressed him back, stopping him in a low voice. "Someone's coming up." In the next second, Cha Tae-kyung directly pushed Kwon Hye-seo away. Cha Tae-kyung's face flushed red, his tone helpless yet tense. "What are you doing? Didn't I say not to do this outside?" Kwon Hye-seo stared fixedly at him, his gaze burning and oppressive. "Uncle, you were the one who broke our agreement first." He pouted, all because Cha Tae-kyung hadn't woken him up that morning. He arrived at the prosecutor's office, only to be rebuffed by a colleague. Cha Tae-kyung turned down his colleague's lunch invitation. In the end, the other man suddenly yanked open his collar. The ambiguous bite marks on his neck were instantly exposed. The man froze on the spot, hastily pulling his hand back in a panic. The tips of Cha Tae-kyung's ears burned as he clamped a hand over the back of his neck. The next second, he all but fled the scene. As soon as he got back to the office, He ran straight into Kwon Hyeseo's unwavering stare. Kwon Hyeseo led him to an empty stairwell. The next second, he pinned him against the wall. That practiced motion made Cha Taekyung's chest tighten. Because he hadn't been able to reach him, Kwon Hyeseo was so anxious his whole body felt feverish. Cha Taekyung could practically feel that heat pressing down on him. I told you to come when you had something to do, not to keep running over like this whenever you feel like it. Cha Taekyung spoke while pushing hard at Kwon Hyeseo to shove him away. I still have to work. You go home first. Next time I leave, I'll always let you know in advance. Kwon Hyeseo's eyes were red at the corners, and there was a bit of hurt on his face. What the heck? You've been trying to drive me away this whole time. You were clearly the one who broke your promise first, and I didn't even get mad. I even stayed here obediently waiting for you to come back. Why are you always criticizing me? Did I do something wrong? You're obviously the one at fault, uncle. Cha Taekyung lowered his eyes in shame, and this time he couldn't find any reason to push him away again. Blushing, he could only coax him to go home first. As long as you behave, I'll give it to you after I get off work. Kwon Hyeseo paused mid-movement. Give me what? When he heard it was the same thing that was mentioned last time, Kwon Hyeseo's eyes immediately lit up. He confirmed it several times over and even stressed that he wasn't allowed to go back on his word. After getting a definite answer, he excitedly landed a kiss on Cha Taekyung's cheek. Cha Taekyung froze on the spot, covering his cheek, his gaze following the direction he left in. When he got home, he didn't have any appetite at all. In the end, with the tips of his ears burning hot, he lay straight down on the dining table, his body still trembling uncontrollably. His voice was hoarse as he looked under the table. That's far enough. Get up. But Kwon Hyeseo didn't want to end it just like that. Instead, he urged Uncle to finish all the food he had bought. If you don't eat your fill, you're definitely going to faint halfway again. As he spoke, the look he gave Cha Taekyung carried a hint of reproach. You're clearly taller than me, but your stamina is this bad. Cha Taekyung's face flushed even redder. This is just my normal stamina. You're the one who's going too far. But I did say you could do whatever you wanted today. Stop. Let's go to... As he spoke, he gently wiped the corner of his mouth for him again. But Kwon Hyeseo hooked up a wicked smile. No, right here. Cha Taekyung froze on the spot. Didn't we already agree yesterday? Kwon Hyeseo's cheeks were burning as he said he wanted to see Uncle do it himself, his words full of coaxing temptation. I was really good today, so Uncle has to behave and listen to me too, right? In the end, Cha Taekyung reluctantly undid his suit jacket. He didn't even dare lift his eyes to look at Kwon Hyeseo, only wanting to finish as quickly as possible. But the more he wanted it to be over, the less strength he could muster, like his nerves needed a stronger kind of stimulation. He suddenly remembered the moment when the two of them had laid everything bare before each other, only for his thoughts to be yanked straight back by Kwon Hyeseo. Uncle, what are you thinking about right now? Kwon Hyeseo stared at him. Why is your face all red again? As he spoke, his hands started to misbehave too, and he leaned close to Cha Taekyung's ear and muttered in a low voice, "Pervert." The next second, Cha Taekyung, his face scarlet, softly begged him for help. At that, Kwon Hyeseo simply couldn't resist at all. He unconsciously slipped into a slightly whiny tone. Honestly, because of you, Uncle, even I've been turned into a pervert by you. What am I going to do? Now Uncle has to take responsibility for me for the rest of his life. After saying that, he directly pressed a kiss to the side of Cha Taekyung's face. Because of Uncle, even I've turned into some kind of pervert. Take responsibility for me for a lifetime. The boy's burning breath brushed against Cha Taekyung's ear. But no matter what, Cha Taekyung just couldn't push him away. After that moment of losing control, Kwon Hyeseo's mood became overly good. He didn't just make breakfast for Cha Taekyung. He even reserved the restaurant for lunch, and while he was at it, suggested they go see a movie after eating. Yet seeing him like this, Cha Taekyung's face was filled only with apology. Something suddenly came up today. I have to go to the Board of Audit in the morning. Kwon Hyeseo's smile instantly froze. He had clearly promised to go to the enrollment orientation with him. Right then and there, Kwon Hyeseo threw a little tantrum. If Uncle's not going, then I'm not going either. You promised we'd go together, but now you're bailing on me. Cha Taekyung was helpless in the face of this childishness, and only called out once, Heso, just those 3 syllables, and Kwon Hyeseo's face immediately flushed. When Uncle called him like that, he had no way to resist. Cha Taekyung said he understood Kwon Hyeseo's feelings, but that he really couldn't get away today. His tone unconsciously grew heavier. If you keep making trouble and acting spoiled like this, I'll be disappointed in you. Only then did Kwon Hyeseo lower his eyes, and his voice dropped very low. Got it? I'll go by myself. I'm sorry, I'll stop making a fuss. Don't be disappointed in me. Cha Taekyung was startled at first, then could only thank him for his understanding. Seeing that Kwon Hye-seo was feeling down, Cha Taekyung promised that he would definitely go with him next time. But what Kwon Hye-seo remembered was only the warmth of the man's palm. Yet Kwon Hye-seo was still uneasy inside. He knew that even if the man accepted him for now, it didn't mean that Cha Taekyung felt the same way about him. He clearly knew this, and still couldn't help but look forward to it. If I just try a little harder, maybe one day he'll fall in love with me. He actually listened carefully to the entire entrance exam orientation from beginning to end. Kwak Un-song was stunned for a moment as he watched this change in him. Kwon Hye-seo knew this was how the man wanted to see him. As long as the man was happy, that was enough. When asked which department he wanted to apply for, Kwon Hye-seo barely paused before directly choosing the law department. Even if it was difficult, he still wanted to be a little closer to the man. On the way back, he received a message from Cha Taekyung. The man said he would come home early today and wanted to have a talk with him. Kwon Hye-seo's face flushed instantly, and he even decided in his heart what they would have for dinner. Cha Taekyung suddenly received a call from his mother. Because of Han Jae-won's big mouth, the fact that he'd been injured was still blurted out. Mom was terribly anxious and said over the phone that she was coming over to check on him at home. Cha Taekyung hurriedly explained that he was already fine, but while Mama Cha was driving, her phone slipped from her hand and fell. The next second, she crashed head-on into Kwon Hye-seo. Cha Taekyung rushed all the way to the hospital. He had originally been worried that his mother was hurt, but on the hospital bed, he saw Kwon Hye-seo. He froze on the spot. "Why are you here?" Mama Cha was also stunned. "You two know each other?" Cha Taekyung turned his face away, not daring to look at Kwon Hye-seo at all, and only said in a low voice, "He's just a younger guy I know." Kwon Hye-seo's expression instantly went cold. Watching the mother and son talk, a faint sadness slowly surfaced in his eyes. "So it really is hard for me to step into his world." It wasn't until Mama Cha was called away by a nurse that Kwon Hye-seo finally spoke slowly. "That person just now, was she your mom? Ajushi?" Cha Taekyung's body trembled, and he was forced to meet his gaze. But Kwon Hye-seo's eyes were filled with displeasure. "You're nothing like her at all. Have you never mentioned me to your family?" "Yeah, right. How could I possibly tell her that Cha Taekyung and a 20-year-old boy are in that kind of relationship?" As he spoke, his tone was filled with bitterness. "But calling him a younger brother I know is way too much of a joke, isn't it? Who would do that kind of thing with a younger brother every single night?" He then moved in close to Cha Taekyung, so close it was almost burning, but his tone clearly cooled a few degrees. "Next time, do me a favor and tell me in advance. Don't do it in front of those middle-aged uncles you know. What role should I be playing here? What if I say one wrong thing? What will I could do?" Cha Taekyung didn't respond. He was just more worried about his physical condition. Kwon Hye-seo turned his back to him. "No need. Nothing hurts." When he sent his mother home that night, she suddenly asked him about Kwon Hye-seo, because during the examination the doctor asked the guardian questions, but he didn't say a single word. Mother Cha saw in Kwon Hye-seo the shadow of Cha Taekyung when he was a child, lacking love yet unwilling to speak up, because he had long since grown used to being alone. Just as Cha Taekyung reached the building of his home, he saw that Kwon Hye-seo had been waiting there for him for a long time. He was rarely this quiet, but in that back view of his, the loneliness was written far too clearly. As soon as Cha Taekyung stepped through the door, he was hugged from behind by him. His voice was muffled. "Uncle, I want to." Cha Taekyung's face flushed red, and he tried to pull him off. "Wait a second, go wash up first." But he only held on tighter, making it impossible to move. "No, I want it right now." Kwon Hye-seo's tone was full of grievance. Saying it didn't hurt was a lie to him. In fact, it had really hurt just now. "Uncle, hold me." Today, Kwon Hye-seo seemed to have completely lost control. Cha Taekyung didn't know how many times he'd cried and begged him, even though his knees were already red from kneeling. His trembling hands were gripped tightly by him, and every part of his body was left only with exhaustion. Kwon Hye-seo had originally wanted to punish him hard, but the moment he saw Cha Taekyung's red and swollen knees, he still softened, his own face flushing as well, and reached out to pull him up in one motion. "Go to the bed," he said in a low voice. "Your knees are all red. If we keep going, you'll get hurt." But from the very beginning, Kwon Hye-seo just couldn't stop. From evening until dawn, he even forgot the time. He only remembered the uncle, eyes red, begging him over and over to stop, yet he simply couldn't. Faced with the uncle who was crying and shaking, he had no resistance at all. It wasn't until the sky was about to brighten that, as he held the sleeping uncle in his arms, Kwon Hye-seo still felt empty inside. with no sense of security at all, even though the uncle had just now cooperated with him so much. "Uncle, are you asleep?" he asked, but got no response. Kwon Hye-seo braced himself up and leaned to his ear. "Taekyung, are you asleep?" He had long wanted to call this name like this. At his ear, Kwon Hye-seo called him again and again, as if confirming and also as if addicted. His gaze slowly slid down to his intact ankle, and in Kwon Hye-seo's eyes, a few more abnormal shadows darkened. "Actually, uncle, during the time when your leg was injured, it was really nice. Without me, you couldn't go anywhere. Without me, you couldn't do anything." During that time, not only did he not feel uneasy, he even felt excessively happy. How about breaking it one more time? He held his ankle, his fingers uncontrollably adding just a bit of pressure. He couldn't go too far, just a little, just enough that he could only stay at home, the kind where he couldn't escape. The moment the thought fell, he lifted his eyes and crashed straight into Cha Taekyung's gaze. What should he do? When did he wake up? Would Uncle think he was really weird? What if Uncle got angry? What if Uncle stopped liking him? Cha Taekyung only let out a low sigh. The next second, he pulled Kwon Hye-seo straight into his arms. "All right, what is it now? Go to sleep." The two were so close that Kwon Hye-seo could even hear his heartbeat. Cha Taekyung's voice was exhausted to the extreme. "Today is already enough. It's getting late. We'll do the rest tomorrow. Go to sleep." Kwon Hye-seo stared at his tightly closed eyes, his face flushing again. From this indulgence, he finally caught hold of a tiny bit of peace. Gently stroking the burn on his back, the youth finally closed his eyes, slowly. The youth's feelings for Uncle were so obsessive they sent a chill down one's spine. He even wanted to break Uncle's leg, so that Uncle would never be able to leave him. But he didn't want Uncle to suffer pain either. In the end, how could he keep someone by his side without hurting him? Kwon Hye-seo had an almost out-of-control possessiveness toward Cha Taekyung. Even though he already had him, could already touch him, his heart still could not feel at ease. Cha Taekyung could clearly sense Kwon Hye-seo's anxiety. Even when he went out to shoot arrows with Han Jae-won, Cha Taekyung insisted on not spending the night out. Cha Taekyung knew very well, if he stayed out for even one night, Kwon Hye-seo would keep calling non-stop until morning. Han Jae-won clearly felt that there was something off about them, even a bit strange. Why were they indulging him like this? It's already come to this point, he's obsessed with you. Shouldn't you take him to a hospital? Cha Taekyung fell silent. Late at night, in that half-awake state before sleep, he saw Kwon Hye-seo propping himself up in front of him. Han Jae-won had thought Cha Taekyung was being blackmailed, but it turned out to be just because Kwon Hye-seo feels uneasy, so I have to stay by his side. Han Jae-won found it absurd. He's not a 3-year-old child. Suddenly, Cha Taekyung received a call from the Genetic Research Institute. The test results were out. He didn't even have time to explain and turned around to leave on the spot. Kwon Hye-seo went to the hospital to have his bandages removed, only to run into someone he absolutely had not expected. When he saw clearly that it was his Aunt Yunwoo, Kwon Hye-seo didn't even say hello and immediately turned his head to leave. The next second, however, Yunwoo was stopped by an acquaintance, Do-won's mother. The woman was overly enthusiastic. Yunwoo originally wanted to catch up with Hye-seo, but was forced to stop. After learning that her wrist was injured, the woman worriedly advised her to take good care of herself. Otherwise, who would take care of Do-won? The boy next to her instantly tensed up and immediately nudged his own mother with his elbow. It was only after Yunwoo walked farther away that the boy, suppressing his anger, scolded his mother. "How could you be so blind? Do-won passed away last year. Their 10-year-old daughter died of cancer, and only then did the woman come to her senses, her face full of self-blame, blaming herself for saying the wrong thing." Kwon Hye-seo's movements suddenly stopped. At the traffic light intersection, the warning sound kept repeating, "Danger ahead, please step back." Yunwoo seemed a little dazed, yet her feet subconsciously stepped forward. The next second, someone suddenly yanked her arm from behind. Yunwoo snapped back to herself and met Kwon Hye-seo's eyes. "Why did you?" Kwon Hye-seo didn't answer and simply turned around to leave. Yunwoo wanted to call out to him, but the bag on her back suddenly slipped to the ground. This time, Kwon Hye-seo looked back, staring at her in a daze. Because he lacked a sense of security so badly, a terrifying thought sprang up in his mind: to make Uncle belong only to him, to cut off his legs so Uncle could only rely on him. But in the end, he still couldn't bear to let Uncle suffer. When he was a child, Kwon Hye-seo would always see his mother drunk and crying, and he tried desperately to please her, just to get a little attention. Even when he was not yet as tall as the stove, he would grit his teeth and cook for his mother. He kept telling himself, "Mom is just sick. As long as I do better, everything will be fine. As long as I keep going like this, one day Mom will definitely get better. The world will go back to how it used to be. We will surely overcome the illness, and Mom will definitely smile as she holds me in her arms. Following his aunt back home, the photo album on the table was opened once again, and it forcibly pried open Kwon Hyeseo's long-sealed memories. Unlike back then when she sent him, all alone, away to be fostered, this time, his aunt behaved unusually close to him. Because she had lost her only daughter, and her last remaining family was now only Kwon Hyeseo. Kwon Hyeseo did not want to stay for a meal, and what made her even more disappointed was that he did not even take the bankbook she handed him. After all, to only now come and make up for the duties of family really did sound ridiculous. His aunt grabbed Kwon Hyeseo, who had turned to leave. "I know you hate me, but Hyeseo, now I really only have you left as family. Could you call me when you have time? We're family too." She lowered herself so much, as if she were begging him. Something in Kwon Hyeseo's heart still stirred, just a little. "If I don't take your money, there has to be a reason." His aunt's eyes lit up at once. "So that's how it is? I didn't think things through. I'm sorry." Kwon Hyeseo saw the photo in the bankbook and, for the first time, made a request to his aunt. "Mom's photo. Are there more? Are there any more photos of Mom?" His aunt got excited and immediately brought him a thick stack. He had just planned to go to the study room to slowly look through them, when he suddenly noticed that there was writing on the photos. By chance, Kwon Hyeseo also came across the crumpled paper he had lost earlier. It had fallen out of Uncle's book. The handwriting on the crumpled paper was exactly the same as on the photos. "Spent my birthday together with Hyeseo Yun 4. Cha Taekyung took the secret the teacher had buried to be tested." On the cross, there was blood from two people. One was the teacher's, and the other was from a male with typo blood. Address: Yeek Kangwon-do, the man who fell off the cliff and died that year. Number 1371. If this necklace belonged to the teacher, then it means that Kim Cheol-woo was pushed off by the teacher. Yet she clearly could have just buried the necklace together with the corpse. Then why did she insist on burying the necklace on the cliff? The name Cecilia was engraved on the cross. Just then, Kwon Hyeseo suddenly called, and Cha Taekyung panicked and hurriedly stuffed the test results back into the file bag. Staring at Cha Taekyung's childhood photo, Kwon Hyeseo cried out of control, his tears falling again and again. He looked at that photo, his voice lowered. "It's nothing, I just missed you, so I called you." Hearing Cha Taekyung say he'd be back right away, Kwon Hyeseo hung up, but then stood there in a daze, softly saying, "I love you, Ajusi." He looked at the young Ajusi and his mom in the photo and finally understood why Ajusi had saved him. Zero, if it was just because he'd known my mom when I was little, why has he always refused to tell the truth? Could it be there are things he doesn't want me to know? As soon as Cha Taekyung came back, he started hounding Kwon Hyeseo about school, asking non-stop. It wasn't until Cha Taekyung said, "If you don't have a specific department in mind, you could also consider a teacher's college," that Kwon Hyeseo completely lost it. "Ajusi, did you ever like my mom?" Cha Taekyung obviously froze, and Kwon Hyeseo, holding back his anger, immediately corrected himself. "No, that's not it. What I should be asking is, did you ever like teacher Kwon Jong-ae? Didn't you already know each other back at Leah Elementary? When the church caught fire, you went to save my mom too, right? But in the end, you saved me instead." The more Kwon Hyeseo spoke, the more he pressed in on Cha Taekyung, his tone tightening. "You kept supporting me afterward, and you're still holding on to the note my mom wrote you, aren't you? Uncle, have you still not forgotten my mom even now? Is that why you're with me, treating me as a substitute to satisfy yourself?" Cha Taekyung instantly felt both ashamed and annoyed, raised his hand and pushed him away. "Watch what you're saying. Do you know what you're saying right now?" Kwon Hyeseo did not back off even a single step. "Then why won't you tell me the truth? If it were just an ordinary teacher-student relationship, there'd be no need to hide it from me, right?" He stared at Cha Taekyung. "Isn't it because you had unusual feelings for my mom that you deliberately concealed it?" Cha Taekyung opened his mouth, wanting to explain, but the next second, he remembered the teacher's almost pleading tone the last time they met. In the end, he clenched his teeth and swallowed everything he wanted to say, leaving only one line. "Think whatever you want. If you insist on making wild guesses like this," he said, forcing down his anger, "then just believe that if you want." But Kwon Hyeseo's next sentence pinned Cha Taekyung to the spot. "Uncle, have you ever liked me? Uncle, have you ever liked me?" In the end, Cha Taekyung still couldn't answer. He only turned around and left one line behind, Don't act like a child. It wasn't until the sound of the door slamming down that Kwon Hyeseo's expression grew even darker. In order to win the uncle's heart, Kwon Hyeseo imitated his mother and secretly slipped into the uncle's bedroom. Ever since he was a child, Kwon Hyeseo has lacked a sense of security, and in this moment he only wants to hold on to Cha Taekyung even tighter, to make Cha Taekyung belong to him alone. Kwon Hyeseo's increasingly paranoid reactions lately are starting to make Cha Taekyung feel suffocated. He's even started smoking again after having quit. Han Jae-won rarely sees him this troubled. Looks like you'll be able to stay late today. Huh? You usually go on every day about having to go back to feed your cat? Han Jae-won chuckled. And then you run home early. Cha Taekyung froze. What cat? Han Jae-won lifted his beer. Aren't you raising a little brat? Just like a cat. And a stray one at that. Han Jae-won clicked his tongue. His temper is awful. Does he still really hate having people over at your place? Cha Taekyung couldn't help frowning. Don't use that weird metaphor to talk about him. Han Jae-won felt he'd hit the nail on the head. What? Did that cat get on your nerves? Seeing Cha Taekyung stay silent, only blowing out big rings of smoke, Han Jae-won understood right away. He'd guessed correctly. Didn't you say last time that kid is really insecure and you have to stay by his side? You looked so nervous and so concerned. So what? Things aren't going the way you wanted now. The more Cha Taekyung listened, the more annoyed he got. If you came here just to make fun of me, then get lost. Only then did Han Jae-won drop the jokes and speak more seriously. How long are you planning to let him live at your place? I know you kept him because you pitted his situation, but he's 20 now. He should start learning to stand on his own. You always shield him, and that's not necessarily a good thing. If you really care about him, you should help him learn to live independently. Seeing that Cha Taekyung still didn't respond, Han Jae-won suddenly felt a bit awkward. Even if I don't say it, you know it better than anyone. If I'm sticking my nose where it doesn't belong, I apologize. But Cha Taekyung finally spoke and actually agreed with him. Because without even realizing it, as long as Kwon Hyeseo wants something, I'll agree to it. Because I always feel he's still just a kid. I think he's soft and pitiful, but I clearly can't take responsibility for him for the rest of my life. Thank you, Ji-won. You're the only one who would say this kind of thing to me. Cha Taekyung and Han Jae-won really could be considered very close. Close enough that they shared the same mom. Back in middle school, Cha Taekyung moved into Han Jae-won's home. At that time, Han Jae-won was actually very unwelcoming toward him. But mom kept siding with Cha Taekyung. Whenever Cha Taekyung called her auntie, she would even get angry about it. Seeing the way Cha Taekyung was trembling, she instead smiled. Taekyung, why are you calling me auntie? We're a family now. You should be calling me mom. With reddened eyes, Cha Taekyung earnestly called her mom. Today was Mother's Day, and both Cha Taekyung and Han Jae-won had prepared flowers for her. He didn't know when it started, but the relationship between the two of them had become more and more harmonious. But their originally peaceful days were gradually disrupted by Kwon Hyeseo. Cha Taekyung came home very late. As soon as he walked in, he saw Kwon Hyeseo curled up on the sofa, as if he had been waiting for him the whole time. Why aren't you sleeping? What are you doing sitting here? Kwon Hyeseo's gaze grew dark. Nothing, I couldn't sleep. Uncle, why are you back so late? And why didn't you answer my calls? Cha Taekyung's tone, however, was calmly cold. I had an appointment. The calls, sorry, I didn't see them. He had just started toward the bedroom when his arm was yanked back by Kwon Hyeseo. Are you starting to get tired of me now? Meeting those aggrieved eyes, Cha Taekyung froze. A second later, he pulled his hand free. It's not what you think. I'm tired, we'll talk tomorrow. It was only after the door closed that Kwon Hyeseo bit down hard on his teeth. Late at night, he quietly pushed open the uncle's bedroom door. But no matter how light his movements were, he still startled Cha Taekyung awake. Cha Taekyung opened his eyes in a daze. When he clearly saw the person in front of him, his eyes instantly widened. Kwon Hyeseo was actually wearing long hair, dressed up like the teacher. In order to make the uncle like him, he sneaked into the bedroom imitating mom's appearance. Cha Taekyung's eyes flew wide open. Are you Hyeseo? Kwon Hyeseo didn't say anything. He suddenly cupped Cha Taekyung's face, and Cha Taekyung, flustered, tried to push him away. Wait, Kwon Hyeseo. Even though he was younger than him, his strength was frighteningly great. Cha Taekyung gritted his teeth and used force to push him away. I already said no, what are you doing? What are you like right now? Kwon Hyeseo's voice sank low. What, you don't want this? I thought looking like this would make me more like mom. Cha Taekyung froze in place again, his ears full of the whispers Kwon Hyeseo breathed against him. Then besides this, what do you like? Tell me what you want. I can give you anything. Kwon Hyeseo's voice slowly choked up. Anything is fine. I'll do my best. I'll do my best to make you satisfied, uncle. So, Could you maybe like me? I don't ask for much, just a little, even just a tiny bit is fine. Whatever you tell me to do, uncle, I'll do it. Listening to his humble and out-of-control plea, Cha Taekyung felt a tightness in his chest. He cupped Kwon Hyeseo's face, trying to pull him back to his senses. Hyeseo, the one I like is you. Just that one sentence made Kwon Hyeseo completely freeze. Just that one sentence made Kwon Hyeseo completely freeze. The next second, his tears came crashing down. You're lying. Even though Cha Taekyung kept insisting it was true, Kwon Hyeseo still refused to believe it. He had always thought there was no way uncle could like him. He held Cha Taekyung's hand, still trembling. I'm really headstrong and I don't listen to you. I'm always making you angry, always making you sigh. How could you possibly like me? There's just no reason at all. You can only hate me. Seeing him cry even harder, Cha Taekyung let out a headache-laden sigh. Of course, Hyeseo, you just do whatever you want, and you're especially disobedient. Those unexpected things you do every time really do catch me off guard. But how could that ever be a reason for me to hate you? You're clearly so adorable. Kwon Hyeseo finally stopped crying, going completely blank as Cha Taekyung held him tightly in his arms. He still couldn't believe it. You really like me? Even if, in your eyes, I have no value at all. Even if all I can do is act foolish and cry and make a fuss. Even if that's the case, Cha Taekyung is still willing to take all of that onto himself. So long as he has him, that's enough. Cha Taekyung's voice is very soft, very gentle. Don't do this kind of thing again. Don't deny yourself anymore. There is nothing wrong with working hard for the sake of love in the first place. But hard work does not necessarily bring any reward. That's just how the world is. So Cha Taekyung wants, without setting any conditions, to give everything of himself to Kwon Hyeseo. He wants Kwon Hyeseo's life to at least have a bit more comfort. He also wants to love him a little more. In order to keep Ajusi's heart, he imitated his mother and quietly slipped into the bedroom. But when he learned that Ajusi and his mother were just in a simple, pure relationship, Kwon Hyeseo instead panicked even more. Just out of gratitude alone, he can go this far. Then when this debt of gratitude is finally repaid, what is he supposed to do with himself? Kwon Hyeseo cannot bring himself to ask. In that instant, he also began to loathe the part of himself that felt relieved his mother had died. He even wished that his mother's death could become a lock that would fasten Cha Taekyung tightly in place. But the way he was thinking, Kwon Hyeseo found it far too frightening. So he went to his aunt to confirm it, and only then did he learn. His mother had been Ajusi's homeroom teacher at Liue Elementary School. Ajusi sponsored him only in order to repay a bit of the kindness he owed his mother. Kwon Hyeseo has never taken this long to reply before. Cha Taekyung can clearly feel that ever since that day, Kwon Hyeseo has been avoiding him. The more Cha Taekyung thinks about it, the more frustrated he gets. He really shouldn't have said those things back then. He should have comforted him more rationally to begin with. But in that situation, he just blurted out, "I like you." How could he possibly believe that? Cha Taekyung panicked on the spot, insisting over and over that this would never work, and he didn't even dare to guarantee he could keep lying. On one hand, he was hiding the truth, and on the other, he was still greedily hoping he and Kwon Hyeseo could genuinely connect with each other. With the help of his colleagues, Cha Taekyung got a lead on Jong In-beom, the guy who had been hiding out of town all this time, yet suddenly came back to Seoul. Because Kwon Jong-ae had wired him a large sum of money before she died, Cha Taekyung decided to get involved in the investigation of this case. Hyeseo. Kwon Hyeseo stared blankly at the childhood photo of him with his mom and his aunt. He had just turned to go back and return the photo to his aunt, but by accident he ran into someone. The side dishes his aunt had given him scattered all over the ground, and the cursing man suddenly fell silent. Because he recognized the person in the photo. He had just picked it up when Kwon Hyeseo snatched it back. "This is mine." The man watched him turn to leave and subconsciously called out, "Kwon Jong-ae." Kwon Hyeseo immediately stared at him warily. "You know my mom?" Only then did the man come to his senses and pull out a smile. "So that's how it is. No wonder you looked so familiar to me." He said this as he took off his hat. "So you're Kwon Jong-ae's son?" For the sake of that uncle, he was even willing to dress himself up like his mother. He couldn't bear to stop loving that uncle, not even when it came to the uncle's lies. Hyeseo had heard from Jong In-beom that his mom had killed someone, but his mom had already paid the price with her life long ago. On the surface, Hyeseo stayed very calm. As soon as the man heard that he knew Cha Taekyung, he started to embellish, saying that Cha Taekyung was a two-faced man. He even said it was Cha Taekyung who informed on Kwon Jong-ae. If he had heard this a few days earlier, Hyeseo might really have wavered. Ever since that time, he'd secretly slipped into the uncle's bedroom, and the two of them laid their feelings bare. Hyeseo had chosen not to look back. He trusted the uncle without hesitation. But at the same time, he also remembered the man in front of him. He was the scoundrel who had hounded his mom for money back then. The one who had truly threatened and blackmailed his mom was this bastard. At this moment, Cha Taekyung, who had been tracking down Jong In-beom all the way, finally found this sand pet, but the latter was completely uncooperative. In the next second, a sudden, violent crash sounded from outside. Ignoring any attempt to stop him, Cha Taekyung pushed the door of the private room open. The moment the door opened, his whole body froze. Hyeseo was actually pounding on Jong In-beom like a madman. There was still blood on Hyeseo's face, and only when Cha Taekyung's voice fell did he suddenly stop. Right after that, taking advantage of this brief opening, Jong In-beom abruptly pulled out a dagger. Cha Taekyung grabbed Hyeseo in one motion and raised his arm to forcibly block the stab. Seeing the wound on the uncle's arm, Hyeseo's gaze swept to the liquor bottle beside him, and his rationality snapped completely. With eyes that looked ready to kill, he swung the bottle up, about to smash it down on Jong In-beom. If it hadn't been for the uncle's voice pulling him back, if it hadn't been for the uncle calling out to him, Hyeseo would never have let Jong In-beom go. Jong In-beom even thought he was really going to die this time, but in the end, he was still taken away by the police. Cha Taekyung looked at Hyeseo and stayed silent for a very, very long time. After the police finished going through all the procedures, Cha Taekyung then truly lifted his eyes to face him and asked whether Jong In-beom had said anything nasty. Anyway, that man could not be trusted. Cha Taekyung was afraid Jong In-beom would use Jong Gwon-ae as an excuse to sling mud at her. Hyeseo stared at Cha Taekyung, his gaze trembling slightly. In the past, whenever he saw Uncle, he only felt that this person was cold, ruthless, and terrifying, as if he had no emotions and could not understand anyone's heart. But now, it was as if he suddenly understood. Cha Taekyung was actually very straightforward. It's fine even if you don't trust me. I can understand, but your mom, Cha Taekyung hadn't even finished his sentence when Hyeseo suddenly pulled him into a tight hug. What should he do? Uncle was just far too lovable. Now nothing else mattered anymore, no matter what secrets you once hid in the past. I only believe in you, Uncle, so don't be anxious anymore. Because in this moment, Hyeseo could even fall in love with his lies. Hyeseo had once again made Uncle cry. With his eyes covered, Cha Taekyung was both tense and uneasy. Hearing the sound of footsteps coming closer and closer, he subconsciously swallowed. But in Hyeseo's eyes, there was none of the imagined joy. He raised his hand and suddenly gripped Cha Taekyung's jaw. Cha Taekyung grew even more uneasy. Hyeseo, is that you? Why aren't you answering? The other person didn't say a single word the whole time, and Cha Taekyung completely panicked. Hyeseo, wait a second. Cha Taekyung tried to push him away, but he didn't budge at all, and his tone unconsciously became anxious. I said, wait a second. Hyeseo, however, directly gripped his wrist. Cha Taekyung couldn't see. He only felt that it wasn't Hyeseo, it was someone else. The hand with which he was pushing and rubbing started to tremble. Hyeseo, did you hear me? Say something. Why aren't you saying anything? Are you joking with me? Or are you really angry? Just now he had clearly said that it would be fine as long as his eyes were covered. Although Cha Taekyung didn't understand why he had to do this. But he had promised that he would never hurt him, because he was someone very important to him. Even though he clearly knew that he wouldn't hurt him, in front of Cha Taekyung's eyes flashed back to that midnight, that pair of nearly crazed eyes of his. Cha Taekyung forcefully pushed him away. Step aside. It ends here, we can't go on. I'll help you fulfill some other wish. Just undo this first. But Hyeseo suddenly yanked his tie back. Getting no response at all, Cha Taekyung completely panicked. I already said, don't go on. Clearly, Hyeseo wasn't the kind of person who would lie. He had said he wouldn't do anything that would hurt him, but he couldn't see Hyeseo's face or hear Hyeseo's voice. And in that moment, Cha Taekyung began to waver. Why was he so sure that Hyeseo would never lie to him? Was it because he himself had been hiding things all along? Does he really understand Hyeseo? Unease and fear surged up all at once, pressing down on him so hard he couldn't breathe. Cha Taekyung thrashed like a madman, trying to break free. Why does it have to be me, going through something like this? He had clearly been holding himself back with all his might, until he heard a soft sob. Only then did Hyeseo yank off the tie covering his eyes. Now you can understand how I feel, right? Not seeing a face, not hearing a voice. There's nothing left but endless anxiety and fear. Every time I'm with you, that's exactly how I feel. I really can't tell whether you like me, or you're just holding yourself back. Do you know how miserable that makes me? I just want to know how you really feel. Only then did Cha Taekyung, cheeks flushed, wipe away his tears. To be honest, I really have been holding back all this time, but I value you a lot and I'm willing to endure it for you, because what you want from me is only this. And this is the only thing I can do for you. Hye-seo gave a faint smile. I don't even know whether I should be happy or sad. When you're with me, do you really not enjoy it at all? Cha Taekyung's answer was completely beyond his expectations. Since you like massages so much. Hye-seo immediately slipped off his shirt. He lightly licked the tip of his lips. Today, I'm claiming Uncle's chest all for myself. In front of others, he's a cold, ascetic uncle. But in private, he's a whiny crybaby who loves to act cute. When Hye-seo heard that he didn't actually dislike him, the emotion in his eyes could no longer be hidden. That night, he truly got to see it. An uncle who would cry awkwardly and even take the initiative to act spoiled. When the first ray of morning light shone in, Hye-seo rubbed his sore, sleepy eyes. He froze. Uncle actually wasn't awake yet. His eyes were tightly shut, being overly well-behaved, and his whole body was covered in marks left by Hye-seo. The tips of Hye-seo's ears grew hot, his eyes flushing red along with them, and he burrowed back under the covers again. In the library, Hye-seo couldn't stop grinning foolishly at his phone, and Cha Eun-song finally couldn't stand it. If you keep that up, just go straight home. But Hye-seo still put on an innocent face, which only made Cha Eun-song even more annoyed. You've been staring at your phone and giggling like an idiot this whole time. You're disturbing my studying. Get lost. So touched his burning face and forced himself to explain. Giggling? I am not. Cha Eun-song couldn't be bothered with him. Go look in the mirror. Didn't you say you wanted to get into law school? Where's that drive you had when you said you were going to prove yourself to Uncle? At the mention of law school, Hye-seo's eyes reddened even more. In the morning, Uncle had asked him, "Are you really interested in law school?" Hye-seo actually didn't like it. He just wanted to earn more money. He wanted to support Uncle with his own ability. Hye-seo's gaze gradually sank. "When I earn lots of money, I'll take care of you from head to toe, a jushi. I'll feed you, dress you, keep you company while you wash up, coax you to sleep. Everything will be done by me. But a jushi, you don't need me to do that. Cha Taekyung doesn't need it either, no matter what. I still hope you'll do what you want to do, because your life is yours. Live more for yourself and for your own happiness." Meeting a jushi's serious gaze, Hye-seo immediately lowered his eyes, his cheeks burning red, because what he wanted, from beginning to end, was only to be with a jushi. He had clearly agreed to study, yet his heart was filled entirely with a jushi. And on top of that, not a single message had come from him. Hye-seo started spacing out again. Is a jushi busy with work? I miss him so much. If only I could live with a jushi forever. I'd do anything, no matter what it is. Cha Taekyung arrived at Migak Church. He found the nun from back then. In everyone's eyes, Kwon Jong-il had always been someone with a strong sense of responsibility. It was impossible for her to commit arson lightly, let alone commit suicide. Sighing, the nun watched as Cha Taekyung took out the necklace and handed it over. Then, "Have you seen this necklace before?" The nun froze for a moment. It looked very familiar to her. After thinking for a long time, she said this seemed to belong to a student from Migak High School, but unfortunately that school had long since been shut down. The lead was cut off again, and Cha Taekyung's heart sank at once, his disappointment hard to hide. He asked the nun again, "What is Kwon Jong-il's baptismal name?" And it didn't match the name on the necklace. To get to the bottom of the truth, he turned around to look for Jong In-beom. Hye-seo saw a pair of diamond rings displayed in the showcase. His face turned even redder. That price was the kind a student wouldn't even dare to approach. But the watches next to them happened to be just within what he could afford with all his money. Just as he was torn, his phone suddenly rang. It was a call from his aunt. Of course, Jong In-beom remembered Cha Taekyung. Back in high school, he had even bullied this grade school kid. In the end, it was Jong Kwan-ae who stepped forward to protect him. He never imagined that the orphan who had been living under others' roofs in the welfare home would actually become a prosecutor. But Cha Taekyung's expression was frighteningly cold. "Mr. Jong In-beom, from 1974 to 1985, you received a total of 625 million won from Kwon Jong-ae. What exactly was this money you took from her?" Jong In-beom came back to his senses still smiling. But Cha Taekyung's face grew even colder. Cha Taekyung ignored his attempt to change the subject. "How exactly did you blackmail Kwon Jong-ae? Did you threaten her?" Jong In-beom stubbornly refused to admit it, insisting that he had not threatened her, until Cha Taekyung mentioned that video on the phone. Only then did Jong In-beom relent and tell the truth. "The day before Kwon Jong-ae suddenly left Liwal Elementary School, I ran into her on Mount Liwal, in the dead of night, walking with a man toward the desolate mountain. The atmosphere between them was strange, so I followed. but the path was too hard to walk. Halfway there I lost them, so I figured forget it and headed back. When I looked up, I saw something fall from the cliff. My heart sank. I felt something was wrong, so I went over to check, and I saw a woman holding an iron shovel, burying a corpse. I instinctively took out my phone and secretly recorded a video. To be honest, the video quality is terrible. You can't see the face clearly. Just relying on that is nowhere near enough. So, besides that video, I have an even more crucial piece of evidence. As soon as Hyeseo rushed to his aunt's place, he saw his aunt wearing a very serious expression, clutching an old envelope in her hand. While cleaning out the storage room, his aunt had come across a letter Kwon Jong-il wrote to her. Hyeseo remembered that he had once asked his aunt about Cha Taekyung, but none of that mattered now. Those things no longer had anything to do with the present. I decided not to press her anymore. Mom has been gone for more than 10 years. Some old truths, if you don't dig them up, the memories can actually stay a bit prettier. He spoke as he started to get up to leave. You went through so much trouble to find, but his aunt grabbed his wrist in a panic. Hyeseo, listen to me first. Things are not as simple as you think. Do you still remember, in the few years before my older sister passed away, she had already developed severe depression. She drank every day, and I didn't even know where she spent all her money. I only knew she had piled up a bunch of debt. A sister like that made me very angry, and I even said a lot of harsh things to her. So I always felt that my sister's suicide was forced out of her by me. After that, I lived in guilt all the time. A flash of sorrow passed through Hyeseo's eyes. It wasn't because of my aunt. As for my mom's suicide, I still can't explain the reason to you right now, but that was my mom's own issue. So auntie, you really don't need to blame yourself. The hand my aunt was holding began to tremble. It's not like that. That's not what I meant. Halfway through her sentence, Inbeom suddenly shot back with a question. You got close to Kwon Jong-il's son because you simply can't forget Kwon Jong-il. Isn't that right? And the reason you're tormenting me like this now is also because I've threatened Kwon Jong-il, isn't it? But why do you insist on digging into the murders committed by Kwon Jong-il? Is it really necessary to expose the crimes of someone who's already dead? That's the dark side that Kwon Jong-il chose to die rather than reveal. Why are you so fixated on Kwon Jong-il's suicide? Cha Taekyung's expression remained calm because that was not a suicide. Hyeseo also learned from her aunt's mouth that her mother had not committed suicide. My aunt painfully covered her face. Hyeseo, your sister, she was murdered, and Cha Taekyung, who had gone through all the clues again from the beginning, became even more certain there was no way the teacher would commit suicide. After all, she had personally asked him to keep it secret, saying that after she turned herself in, she would confess everything to Hyeseo in person. On the day the teacher passed away, a small yet sharp thorn grew in Cha Taekyung's heart. There was no way the teacher would commit suicide. While organizing the files, Cha Taekyung received a message from Han Jae-won. Because of the case, Cha Taekyung couldn't go home to help his mother move. His mind was filled with his conversation with Jong In-beom, and with one even more crucial piece of evidence: the letters exchanged between Kwon Jong-il and her accomplice. That letter was something I accidentally discovered when I snuck into Kwon Jong-il's house. In that letter, everything the two of them had done was written out, like a naked confession. All I remember is that the other person's name in the letter was, and that name was exactly the same as the one on the necklace. Cha Taekyung immediately pressed him on where that letter was, but Jong In-beom said he had lost it, because after Kwon Jong-il died, he was investigated by the prosecutor, and everything on him was confiscated. Later, when he was found to be free of suspicion, all his belongings were returned, except for that letter. When he asked about the prosecutor in charge of the case back then, Cha Taekyung immediately called Hwang Ji-yeon. But as soon as this case was mentioned, the other party's tone became extremely impatient. She hung up after only a few words. Hyeseo also finished reading that letter. Mom only said that she had committed a crime so terrible that she couldn't even explain it clearly in words. More than once she wanted to turn herself in, but every time she thought of Hyeseo, she just couldn't let go. But she was also afraid of being found by that person, because that person, for his own purposes, could hurt others without a moment's hesitation, Yun-woo. But for Hyeseo's sake, she planned to fight back against that person, Hyo-yeon. If something really happened, then when Hyeseo grew up, these things would be passed on to him. Mom absolutely did not abandon you. Mom really, really loves you. My aunt felt both heartbroken and guilty. My older sister suddenly started hiding and sneaking around, and I thought she was avoiding debt collectors, but it wasn't that at all. My sister was being threatened all along. It's possible that her death was also because of that person. So's voice trembled slightly. That person? "Who is it?" But my aunt went through every clue over and over and still couldn't find anything. Hyeseo, think about it. On the day your sister had the accident, could there have been a stranger who came to that church? Hearing this, Hyeseo's pupils suddenly constricted. The uncle had rescued him from the fire. Hyeseo suddenly grew selfish and hardened his heart to lie and say no. He grew selfish and, against his conscience, told his aunt no. No one came. That day, there was only Mom and me in the church. My aunt suspected nothing, but she still couldn't figure out who on earth had done that to my sister. Hyeseo's mind was a mess, but he still didn't believe it. Who would set a fire with their own hands, then risk their life to rush into the flames to save someone? There is no way the uncle is the killer. Yet every step the uncle has taken feels like he's crossing the line. That day, he even said that the debt owed to him still had to be repaid. Could it really be just to repay the kindness Mom once showed him? And if it's not? Hyeseo walked alone to Migak Church. The out-of-control flames from that day seemed to surge up again before his eyes. He stared at Migak Church, cold sweat slowly seeping out as the immense shadow pressed down on him so hard he could hardly breathe. His feet felt nailed to the spot. He couldn't even take half a step inside. He had just been about to turn back when the nun called out to stop him. Seeing that Hyeseo was doing well, the nun smiled sincerely. "Why have you never come to see me even once since then?" Hyeseo lowered his eyes, his voice a little muffled. "I thought you didn't want to see me, because that fire at the church was all because of my mom." The nun's tone was very gentle as she frankly said that she had never hated him or his mother. Only then did Hyeseo open his mouth to ask whether, on the day his mother died, there had been any suspicious person in the church. The nun looked surprised. "You two actually asked the same question. Not long ago, a young, fair-skinned male prosecutor did come by." Hyeseo's heart gave a jolt. Could that person be named Cha Taekyung? The moment the nun nodded, he finally let out a breath of relief. So Uncle had known all along that Mom hadn't killed herself. Has he been looking for the murderer? Then why has he never told me? Only then did the nun mention a necklace engraved with a baptismal name. With this clue in hand, Hyeseo turned and ran off, practically sprinting back. At the same time, Cha Taekyung had already arrived in Seoul. He was going to personally track down Hwang Ji-yeon to get answers. Yet the look on her face clearly said, "You're not welcome." Hyeseo was flipping through his mom's high school photo album. It has to be here. The answer has to be here. Just then, his aunt's call suddenly came through, and the first thing she said was a key piece of information. "Back when my sister was still alive, she always said, 'Ji-shan, if anyone asks where I am, you must never tell them, except for one single exception.' Just a few days before my sister died, I told someone where she lived. I really can't remember who that person was. I hadn't wanted to say anything at all. But he used his status as a prosecutor to force me to cooperate with the investigation." Cha Taekyung pestered Hwang Ji-yeon for a long time. Driven to a headache, she finally spat out the truth. "Actually, that case, I was too busy at the time. So I handed the case over to a junior colleague in the same division to handle. By the rules I shouldn't have, but at that time everyone just tacitly accepted it. The seized item you mentioned, I think, it was probably that junior who handled it on his own." When Cha Taekyung asked for that junior's name, his whole body froze on the spot. There was nothing left in his eyes but disbelief. Hyeseo also suddenly remembered those off details from when he was first put on trial. Faced with his mother's death, the very first thing that prosecutor asked him was this: "Why did your mom have to do that? Yet you spoke as if you had already decided she had simply killed herself." On the day Han Jae-won moved house, he suddenly caught sight of his mother's high school class photo. A pang shot through his chest, and he asked softly, "Mom, do you ever regret resigning?" Every prosecutor he met would bring his mom up, saying it was such a pity you quit. If you'd kept going at the Seoul Central District Prosecutor's office, you probably would have become chief prosecutor long ago. Han Hee-soo pulled the shawl tightly around her body. "To be honest, it's not that I haven't thought about it, but what else can I do? With this body of mine, I really can't hold on any longer. The past has already gone far away. Don't keep clinging to things you can't go back to. So now, it's time to let go of my obsession." From the forced closeness at the beginning, it later turned into mutual devotion. But once the truth surfaced, Hyeseo also gradually turned dark. Cha Taekyung never imagined that his adoptive mother would actually kill the teacher he respected the most. After learning that his teacher had killed someone, Cha Taekyung immediately called the police station to confirm, but the other side said no homicide had occurred. Yet on that very same day, he saw the tire tracks left by his adoptive mother's car at Migak Church. Right after that, a big fire broke out at the church. Cha Taekyung pressed down all his doubts and still went back to his adoptive mother's home. While helping with the move, he accidentally ran into the truth behind a mural. In his memory, his adoptive mother had always treated him very well and had always been very gentle. Even now, he still can't believe that the killer would be his adoptive mother. In the end, he still raised his hand and knocked on his adoptive mother's door. After the small talk ended, Cha Taekyung's expression became extremely grim. "Mom, go turn yourself in." He said these words in a heavy voice. Cha Taekyung's voice also grew more and more hoarse. "Behind the portrait at the end of the second-floor corridor, I found that letter. It was that letter you, Mom, withheld from Jong In-beom, the one that said long ago, the evidence that you two committed a murder together. Inside, there was also a very old necklace, the teacher's necklace, blackened by smoke and fire. I don't know what exactly happened between you and the teacher, Mom, but I still want to believe those things have been carefully kept by you all this time. At the very least, it shows that you feel guilty, Mom. So please turn yourself in, I beg you, Mom." Only then did Han Hee-soo slowly turn around, but her voice was unexpectedly calm. "From the moment I met that kid Hye-seo, I had already guessed it. As expected, it was just as I thought." As she spoke, she tore off the bandage on her arm. "So, when did you find out?" "Until that patch of burn scar was completely exposed to the air," Cha Taekyung explained. "That day, before the fire broke out, I saw the car that fled from the church. It was yours, Mom. At the time I thought I'd seen it wrong, but I hadn't. That really was your car, Mom." When Han Hee-soo heard that Hye-seo still didn't know, she instead found Cha Taekyung's desire to turn himself in ridiculous. "Taekyung, you're a prosecutor too? You should know this very well. Everything you've gathered now is only indirect evidence. The key evidence was burned up long ago. Even if I go and turn myself in, I'll only be found not guilty." Hye-seo was able to grow up this well, even in such a harsh environment. It's probably because you've been protecting him and supporting him all this time. Do you think he can handle this truth? Even if I turn myself in, it won't change anything in reality. It will only make that child suffer. What if he can't bear the truth and does something dangerous? Can you take responsibility for that? But Cha Taekyung's gaze only grew more resolute. Hye-seo won't do that, because I will always stay by his side. As long as I'm here, Hye-seo will not fall. No matter how many times it takes, I will bring Hye-seo back. Han Hee-soo let out a cold laugh. "You're really arrogant and really confident. If love alone were enough to save someone, that would be wonderful." Seeing that she had no way out, Cha Taekyung stood up directly. "If Mother is unwilling to turn herself in, then I'll call the police. Even with only indirect evidence, it's enough to open a case and start an investigation. If they keep digging, they might even dig up key evidence I missed before." Han Hee-soo fell silent. Just as Cha Taekyung was about to leave, she suddenly spoke up and called out to him. The fact that his adoptive mother was the murderer was something Cha Taekyung had also struggled with for a long time before he forced himself to accept it. The teacher was already gone, and if he were to be driven out of this home again, then he would truly have only himself left, all alone. He also wanted a real family, so the last thing he wanted was to send his adoptive mother to prison with his own hands. Han Hee-soo took out a piece of paper and handed it over. "Open it and see." Cha Taekyung's expression instantly froze when he saw the words written on it. Han Hee-soo's tone was very steady as he slowly explained, "Didn't you ask me before why I resigned as a prosecutor? I told you all it was because I was too tired. That was a lie. I didn't want you to worry. I hadn't planned to tell you, Sue, but I have cancer, stage 3 breast cancer. Hee-soo, I have cancer, stage 3 breast cancer. The doctors don't know how many more years I have, Sue, and I refuse treatment because I don't want to spend the rest of my life in a hospital. Taekyung, what do you think? Do you want me to spend the rest of my life in courtrooms and prison? Is that really the outcome you want? For me, and for your family as well?" After leaving his adoptive mother's house, Cha Taekyung was completely mired in helplessness and inner turmoil. By the time he got home, it was already very late, and his head hurt so badly it felt like it was splitting open. Cha Taekyung didn't know what choice he was supposed to make. He gritted his teeth and still took out his phone. He should contact Han Jae-won first and go to a larger hospital for a proper examination. But as soon as he looked up, the room was a complete mess, and before Cha Taekyung could even react, Hye-seo's gloomy voice pressed in from the side. "You're back. Working late again? You must be exhausted. Are you hungry?" Cha Taekyung didn't answer. He only stared at the room. How had the house become like this? Hye-seo glanced around and murmured an apology. "I was looking for something. I'll tidy up in a bit." Cha Taekyung's heart suddenly tightened. What are you looking for? Hyeseo didn't respond to that, and instead asked him, a few days ago, you went to Migak Church, didn't you? Cha Taekyung's gaze paused. Hyeseo had directly torn open the thing he least wanted to face. The nun there said a prosecutor went to ask about every detail of my mom's death. And do you know what my aunt said? She said my mom didn't kill herself. She was murdered. Honestly, I don't even know what she's talking about. Don't you think it's ridiculous? It's been 10 years, and she's only telling me this now. What am I supposed to do? I know it sounds absurd, but I just can't let it go. I can't stop thinking about it, so I turned this whole room upside down. But uncle, how much do you actually know? Why did you go to Migak Church? And where did that necklace come from? Hyeseo clutched him tighter, his voice growing more and more frantic. Was my mom really murdered? Who killed her? Uncle, you're looking for that killer too, aren't you? You've been searching for her this whole time because you want that person to pay the price, right? Cha Taekyung suddenly shoved him away. It was only when Hyeseo stumbled and fell to the floor in a mess that he snapped back to his senses a little. His fingertips were covered in blood from being cut by the porcelain shards. I'm sorry. It's all my fault for asking such weird questions. I didn't mean to blame you, uncle. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have asked that kind of question. I won't ever ask again. I'll clean the room right now. I'll clean it thoroughly. I'll make sure every last bit is spotless. Seeing Hyeseo lose control like this, Cha Taekyung froze up once again. His foster mother's words echoed in his ears. What if he can't handle the truth? Hesitates. What if he can't handle the truth and does something dangerous? How arrogant, how confident. Isn't that just perfect? Isn't it? From the very first moment he saw the older man, he'd already been thinking about him. But now, he was the one who had thrust the knife into the older man's body with his own hands. Ever since that unhappy parting that day, it had been a full month since Cha Taekyung last went to see Hyeseo. When his friends got together, though, he was showing up unusually often. Everyone had thought the older man was aloof and hard to get along with, but it turned out he was actually a bit slow and very gentle. Cha Taekyung drifted off slightly in a daze. Come to think of it, I haven't gone to see Hyeseo even once this month. But is there really any absolute need to go? As long as the money hits the account, that's enough. Hyeseo doesn't seem to have run into trouble either. He seems to be doing pretty well. Having done this much, he could be considered to have done his best. After all, he's not really Hyeseo's family. But that thorn he ignored that day, where on earth did it end up piercing? Hyeseo panicked, completely at a loss. What's wrong? Is the older man still angry? She's already dead. She's no longer by my side. Why do I still have to be trapped by my mother's death? After a long time, Cha Taekyung finally spoke. You're right. Hyeseo stared straight at the uncle. The uncle's voice fell right by his ear. Even if you call the police, it's useless. Those key pieces of evidence, 10 years ago, they were already burned to ashes. Even if they hadn't been burned, after so many years, they'd be impossible to find. Relying only on subjective judgment and indirect evidence, the final verdict would definitely be not guilty. If you want compensation, I'll pay you on her behalf, even if I have to hand over all my assets, so let's end it here. That last sentence was like a heavy hammer, pounding hard into Hyeseo's chest, heavy and painful, but he still forced out a smile. I don't understand what you're talking about. He spoke as he slowly crawled toward the uncle. I don't need something like compensation. As long as I have you, that's enough. His blood-stained hand anxiously brushed against the hem of the uncle's clothes. His voice trembled, like he was begging for help. I won't ask anything ever again. I don't want to know either. I'm begging you, I'll do everything exactly the way you say. Really. Please believe me, I'll do well. I can do it really well. I'm begging you to believe me. Cha Taekyung was slightly dazed. In this world, is there anything easier than coaxing a lonely child? You lower your voice to deceive a child who longs to be loved, then make that ridiculous promise. I'll stay with you for the rest of my life. This child gives up everything a human being ought to cherish, and lives only to obey you. This absolute, blind emotion actually became his reason to go on living. So heavy it made it hard to breathe, and so terrifying it sent a chill through him. Cha Taekyung forced himself to press his voice down until it was ice cold. Please, Hyeseo, leave this house. But Hyeseo clung to him with a death grip, his voice suddenly choking up. Why? I'll behave, I really mean it. Uncle, don't you like me too? Didn't you say you cherished me? Then why now? One sentence from Cha Taekyung, cold enough to cut to the bone, made Hyeseo stop struggling all at once. Why would I like you? You're willful, you make trouble, you never listen, and you only ever do things that go beyond common sense. How could I possibly like someone like you? Yet before, this had clearly been the very reason Uncle couldn't bring himself to dislike him. What used to be called cute was now wiped away in one stroke by I never liked you. Hyeseo's lips trembled. You're lying. You think I can't tell. You just want to cut me off, that's why you're saying this on purpose. His thoughts were laid bare. So Cha Taekyung simply turned around and stopped looking at him. If you won't leave, then I will. Hyeseo froze for a moment. Out of the corner of his eye, he caught sight of the fruit knife beside him. He snatched it up like he'd gone mad. Don't go! Without a moment's hesitation, Hyeseo pressed the tip of the knife to his own chin. If you take one more step, I'll stab it in. Cha Taekyung still didn't move, and Hyeseo's tone grew even harder. I mean it, I really will stab it in. You think I don't dare? As he spoke, his hand began to tremble, and his voice grew more choked. When have I ever forced you to choose me? Have I ever asked you to sacrifice anything for me? The only thing I've ever wanted is just for you to stay by my side. Didn't we agree on that? You clearly promised me you wouldn't abandon me and leave me all alone. Hyeseo's tears suddenly came crashing down. I can't live without you. Ajusi, I'm begging you, please save me. I want to keep living, too. I really also want to live well. But the meaning of being alive is growing more and more blurred. Every time I feel like I'm only one step away from death, I think of you. I want to live. If it's because of you, then I want to live. If it's you, you will definitely save me. You will definitely let me go on living. I know you very well. You're best at lying. When necessary, you put on a perfect mask and hide your heart without leaking a bit. At first glance, you seem so cold that no one can get close. But in truth, you're very gentle. You value feelings, you don't forget kindness, and you also take care of the weak because your sense of responsibility is too strong. You shoulder everything all by yourself, yet the moments when you occasionally show your vulnerability are cuter than anyone else's. So it's impossible for you to abandon me, because every time I want to give up my life, the person who grabs hold of me is you. The one who won't leave me no matter what I've done. That's the you I know. Cha Taekyung turned around and murmured in a low voice, I've had enough. Even though Hyeseo's face was streaming with tears, he didn't spare her another glance. You really haven't changed at all. No, it's actually gotten even worse. Stab however you want. None of this has anything to do with me anymore. Watching him turn away mercilessly, Hyeseo pressed the tip of the knife to his own throat, tears pouring even harder. I never once dared to hope that you would choose me, because I've long known I'm not your first choice. But even so, it didn't matter. Even if you chose someone else, not me, as long as you didn't leave me. Thinking of this, Hyeseo suddenly lunged at Cha Taekyung. As long as he wasn't abandoned, the uncle's past words still echoed in his ears. You just have to be yourself, Hyeseo, because you're someone I treasure very much. Yet in Hyeseo's heart, the uncle had almost filled everything. Cha Taekyung stiffened in pain. Fresh blood began to drip down. Cha Taekyung lowered his head and saw the wound on his lower abdomen, his eyes full of disbelief. He had underestimated Hyeseo's obsession. He turned around and saw Hyeseo burying his face in his shoulder. He didn't even have time to utter a single word of reproach. Cha Taekyung coughed up a mouthful of blood. He tried to use that blood-soaked hand to desperately grab hold of Hyeseo, but in the end, his body still went limp and collapsed to the ground. With the stab, Hyeseo had, after all, plunged the knife in. Panicked and at a loss, he clung tightly to the uncle, whose whole body was covered in blood. And that single stab also forcibly tore them apart for a full 7 years. When Han Ji-won rushed over, the first thing he saw was Cha Taekyung lying in a pool of blood, unconscious. He froze for half a second. Then the next second he dashed toward Cha Taekyung like a madman. But the first thing Cha Taekyung did when he woke up in the hospital bed was ask, "Where is Hyeseo?" Han Ji-won was both angry and anxious. Cha Taekyung had been in a coma for 10 whole days, and he'd been so worried his heart almost stopped. Yet the first thing Cha Taekyung said when he woke up was Hyeseo, and Han Jae-won's expression instantly darkened. "Why are you still looking for that guy? He tried to kill you. I told you long ago that kid wasn't normal. I should have forced you two apart back then." Cha Taekyung let out a soft sigh, but still stubbornly kept asking about Hyeseo. Han Jae-won curled his lip and turned to run straight out. "He stabbed you and then ran." Han Jae-won ground out between clenched teeth. "I will definitely catch that brat and throw him in prison. Do you understand? I'll use every means possible to make him rot in jail for the rest of his life." Cha Taekyung's mind was in chaos, but his voice was so low it sounded like he was begging him. "Don't do this, Daewon. Stop involving yourself with Hyeseo. I'm begging you." Han Jae-won roared. "This is the first and also the last time I'm begging you." He lowered his head, as if he were throwing all his fire at Cha Taekyung. "You bastard, jerk, cold-blooded and heartless." For Hyeseo's safety, Cha Taekyung could only go along with him. "You're right about everything." Cursing until his throat went hoarse, Han Ji-won laid out his terms. Then promise me you'll never see that kid again for the rest of your life. Even if you bump into him on the street, you have to pretend you don't know him. Cha Taekyung's gaze froze. He paused for a few seconds, and in the end he still agreed. Afraid he would go back on his word, Han Ji-won cruelly drove the point home. Is it settled? If you dare break this promise, I'll cut ties with you. To make sure they would never run into Hseo again, Han Jae-won decided to sell Cha Taekyung's current house and have the whole family move to Busan. Faced with such a determined Han Jae-won, Cha Taekyung finally gave in. By the time he was discharged from the hospital, it was already winter. Cha Taekyung suddenly saw that red scarf hanging from the tree. It was the birthday present he had bought for Hseo. In the end, under Han Jae-won's urging, he walked farther and farther away, getting more and more distant from that red scarf. Prosecutor General candidate Han Hee-soo not only beat cancer, but 7 years later officially entered parliament. Cha Taekyung answered the phone and ran desperately through the rain. Suddenly, his expression went rigid. He kept feeling that someone was following him. But when he turned around, there was nothing there. In the end, he drove away. The car went farther and farther. Hseo came out from the corner, holding an umbrella. He stared straight in the direction where Cha Taekyung had left, his gaze steady, as if pressing something down in his heart. When they met again, the uncle was locked in the bedroom by Haija, whom he had raised himself, and the youthful innocence from back then was long gone from Hseo's face as well. After waking up in the hospital, it was as if Hseo had completely disappeared, yet his shadow was everywhere. Why are you ignoring me? What are you thinking about? Are you still mad because I went to the office to look for you? But if I didn't, I wouldn't be able to see you. You never come home. I'm the only one in that huge house. Hseo's low voice made his retreating back look even lonelier. Cha Taekyung's heart gave a jolt, and he almost instinctively reached his hand out to him. But the next second, his wrist was caught by Hseo. Hseo suddenly seemed like a different person, with a slightly wicked smile. Just now, did you feel really sorry for me? Uncle only fails to hide his expression when he's feeling guilty. Do you know how ridiculous you look right now? Cha Taekyung froze on the spot. But then Hseo's aggrieved tone suddenly shifted. Why so serious? I was just teasing you, just saying whatever. But if you really do feel sorry for me, then hold my hand. Hseo's smile was especially bright. Cha Taekyung jolted awake, his heart still pounding wildly. Clearly, it had been a while since he last dreamed of these things. Suddenly, the sound of pages turning rang in his ears. Cha Taekyung looked over on instinct and actually saw Hseo. Like a dream. Hseo? It's you, right? How are you here? No, where even is this place? Even in his panic and confusion, Cha Taekyung could tell. This time, it was real. Hseo never lifted his eyes from beginning to end, only quietly closing the book. He turned to leave, and Cha Taekyung panicked in an instant. He almost shot to his feet on reflex, wanting to call out to stop Hseo, but his legs gave way. He stumbled and fell, a shrill metallic clang ringing out. Hseo finally looked back. Cha Taekyung lay sprawled on the floor in a wretched heap. He glanced behind him, and his whole body went rigid. His ankle had actually been fastened in a shackle of chains. He stared fixedly at where the chain met his ankle. Cha Taekyung's face was filled with confusion. When he lifted his head, he crashed right into Hseo's direct gaze. Those eyes looked so calm they held no warmth at all. Hseo reached out, gently extending his hand toward the uncle's faintly trembling face. The next second, he ignored Cha Taekyung's attempts to stop him. He forcibly pushed down the yearning he'd carried for years, even forcing his voice to turn cold. Stay here and wait obediently for me. I'll be right back. Cha Taekyung stared blankly at his departing back. It was only at this moment that he realized how frighteningly unfamiliar Hseo had become. Han Jae-won kept calling Cha Taekyung, but the calls would not go through no matter what. He had not yet figured out why Cha Taekyung would not answer when he was stopped by the senior colleague who was with him. The other person actually wanted to introduce his own daughter to him. Han Jae-won rejected him outright with, "The age gap is too big." After sending the senior away, Han Jae-won let out a helpless sigh. There were some things he could not bring himself to say, so he could only stare at the text message on his phone with a headache. This time he's been angry even longer than I imagined. It really seems serious. What should I do for him to cool down? He had just opened the door when someone at the doorway came looking for him again. After hearing why the two of them had come, Han Jae-won froze on the spot, but he did not say anything more. He got straight into the car and slammed on the gas, speeding off. Yet those two sentences kept replaying over and over in his head. His expression darkened frighteningly. "You know Cha Taekyung, right? Last Friday, There was a murder at the Incheon building. Cha Taek-young was the suspect in that case and is currently on the run. 7 years later, upon meeting again, the uncle found that the kid he had personally raised had locked him inside a room. Hseo even roughly shoved food into Cha Taek-young's mouth, forcibly blocking his voice. He had been plotting for 7 years. There was no way he would let Cha Taek-young go, because the child who once lay at the uncle's feet, crying and sobbing, had already died 7 years ago. As soon as he heard that Cha Taek-young had become a fugitive suspect, Han Jae-won rushed to his place at once. The keypad kept showing an incorrect password. He cursed, "Damn it," under his breath, but the hand pressing the keys wouldn't stop shaking. He was afraid that the scene from 7 years ago would repeat. Afraid he would see Cha Taek-young covered in blood again. His pupils suddenly contracted. Finally, the password was correct. He shoved the door open and, in a panic, shouted Taek-young's name. But what answered him was an empty room. The worry on Han Jae-won's face deepened. The shackle that Hseo had prepared for Cha Taek-young's ankle was very long, so long that it allowed him to move freely around the room, with exquisite food and red wine laid out in front of him. But Cha Taek-young did not move at all. 1,000 questions piled up in his heart. "Are you still alive?" Hseo swept a cold glance over him. He sat down, his tone full of mockery. "What, you thought I was dead? And now that you've found out I'm still alive, you're very disappointed?" "Misunderstood." Cha Taek-young hurried to explain. "What are you saying? It's not like that. These past 7 years. Where did you go? Have you been well? I just haven't seen you for so long. Suddenly seeing you, I was simply startled. That's all. Where is this place? Why did you tie me up?" Hseo slowly sipped the red wine, as if lamenting how fast time had passed. But Cha Taek-young was in no mood to listen and only wanted answers. Only then did Hseo slowly lift his eyes, his gaze passing over him to look out the window. "This is my villa. As you can see, it's all forest around here and almost no one ever comes, so you'd better give up on the idea of escaping right now." Cha Taek-young's whole face was written with shock. "What is this supposed to be? Are you planning to keep me locked up here forever?" Hseo's silence was the answer. Cha Taek-young panicked in an instant. "Are you crazy? This is a crime. If I disappear for a few more days, someone will report me missing. Do you think the police won't be able to find this place? If you get caught on the spot, I won't be able to save you either." What answered him was still silence. The more Cha Taek-young thought, the more his mind spun. Why on earth did it have to be like this? He suddenly thought of something, his breath catching, and he raised his eyes to stare fixedly at Hseo. Could it be because of what happened 7 years ago that you became like this? Are you taking revenge on me? So let out a mocking snort. "Revenge? So that's why you were scared out of your wits when you saw I was still alive? You thought I came back just to get revenge?" Cha Taek-young clenched his fists, his voice turning hoarse. "I only hoped you could forget all of this and go on living well." But in Kwon Hseo's ears, it only sounded like he was trying to ease his own conscience. Cha Taek-young wanted to explain, but when the words reached his lips, he still lowered his head. "Fine, think whatever you want. Unlock the chains right now. I can still pretend nothing ever happened." He gritted his teeth, and in return was met with silence again. "Kwon Hseo, did you hear me? Before I start regretting this." Hseo sounded completely out of patience. "How long are you going to keep saying this boring crap?" he said coldly. "Stop saying things that annoy me. Eat first, aren't you hungry?" That sentence directly ignited Cha Taek-young's temper. "I'm not eating." He stared at Hseo. "I don't want to eat food from someone who locked me up." Hseo just looked at him coldly like that, not a trace of warmth in his gaze. Then he stood up and muttered in a low voice, "Then there's no helping it." Cha Taek-young looked utterly confused, a tightness rising in his chest. He only saw Hseo pick up a pomegranate with one hand. The next second, Hseo suddenly grabbed Cha Taek-young by the chin and forced the pomegranate into his mouth. Immediately after, his whole body was pushed down and pinned to the ground. Cha Taek-young struggled desperately, but he still couldn't match Hseo's strength. The more he resisted, the more Hseo's eyes seemed to narrow. Cha Taek-young clamped down hard on Hseo's wrist. In his eyes, there was nothing but tightly restrained anger. Hseo only let out a cold laugh. With just this little strength, with open provocation, he leaned into Cha Taek-young's ear and whispered, "Can you bite my finger off? If you really want to shake me off, then use a bit more force, enough to make me bleed." Cha Taek-young's tears were on the verge of bursting out. Hseo froze for just a split second. In the next second, he pressed his finger straight between Cha Taek-young's teeth. Seeing that Cha Taek-young still wouldn't bite down, Hseo finally stood up and gave a light cough. "Give up. You're not getting away. No matter what you do, I won't let you go. That kid who used to lie at your feet and cry died 7 years ago. To have the uncle all to himself, Hyeseyo spent a full 7 years plotting this imprisonment. This entire villa was specially built to pen in the uncle. Even if Cha Taekyung used all his strength to smash the table against the glass, he couldn't even make a single crack. What was even more terrifying was that he had no idea where this place was. It felt like a villa buried deep in the mountains. It was like a villa buried deep in the mountains. Since yesterday, he hadn't seen a single person pass by, and it was so quiet it was excessive, as if it had been completely cut off from the world. Even if Cha Taekyung managed to break free of the chains, he wouldn't be able to get out on his own. The best option was to call for help from the outside world, but even after searching the entire second floor, he couldn't find a single phone. The shackle on his ankle was long enough for him to move back and forth on the second floor. In a place like this, it's impossible there aren't any communication devices. Cha Taekyung guessed they were probably on the first floor. Right now, the only option was to find a way to make Hyeseyo personally unlock the shackles on Cha Taekyung. With Hyeseyo gone, Cha Taekyung decided to search the second floor again first. He had no idea that every step he took was in Hyeseyo's eyes, monitored from 360 degrees with no blind spots. Hyeseyo simply sat quietly in the car, his gaze fixed unblinkingly on the surveillance footage. Once they got home, Cha Taekyung spoke first. I want to wash up. Hyeseyo merely cast him a faint glance. He didn't just want to wash up. He also wanted to change clothes. He hadn't washed since yesterday, and his whole body felt uncomfortable. The moment Hyeseyo pulled open the drawer, Cha Taekyung instinctively flinched. Inside lay a collar with a chain attached. Before Cha Taekyung had time to resist, it was slipped directly around his neck. Right after that, the shackles on his feet were removed. Hyeseyo's thumb brushed over the chain at his neck. Satisfied? Go wash. I'll get you some clothes. But with this outcome, Cha Taekyung wasn't satisfied at all. But he had no choice. In the end, he still decided to go along with Hyeseyo for now. Got it, I'll do as you say. Seeing right through his thoughts, Hyeseyo continued to stare at him without saying a single word. Cha Taekyung pretended to be unusually cooperative. I don't know whether you're after revenge or something else, but I'll stay here obediently until you undo this for me. Feeling like the pressure from his stare was about to explode the gauge, Cha Taekyung still forced himself to push on, hoping to get Hyeseyo to undo the collar. What is this supposed to be? I'm not an animal. I'm not going to run away. At least let me be treated like a person. Only then did Hyeseyo step closer, pressing in on him. Will you really stay here obediently until I cool off? Cha Taekyung instinctively backed away in fear. Yes, but Hyeseyo leaned right in, lowering his voice. Then what if I never cool off? Do you still want to stay here and be with me forever? Cha Taekyung was clearly stunned, and Hyeseyo couldn't help but let out a cold laugh. What's there to be so surprised about? Exactly. Why are you saying a lie that falls apart the moment you hear it? What was even more unexpected was that Cha Taekyung actually agreed. If you're willing, I'll live here forever. Those words pinned Hyeseyo to the spot. He remembered that 7 years ago, Cha Taekyung had also said he wouldn't abandon him, he would always stay with him. Hyeseyo suddenly pulled Cha Taekyung into a hug, so happy he couldn't put it into words, even letting out a laugh. Cha Taekyung understood even less, as Hyeseyo buried his face in Cha Taekyung's shoulder. Cha Taekyung still didn't understand. Hyeseyo buried his face in his shoulder. He was just so happy that he felt it was ridiculous. But Cha Taekyung wanted to push him away. Although he didn't know why, he just wanted to put some distance between them first. In the next second, however, Hyeseyo grabbed his wrist. What kind of sudden madness are you having again? That one move completely ignited Hyeseyo. His eyes turned so dark it was terrifying. Cha Taekyung was so frightened that his whole body trembled. His gaze darted away in a panic. Cha Taekyung spun around and bolted for the door, but Hyeseyo caught up with him in a single step. As an adult, Hyeseyo really was much stronger. The 36-year-old uncle, however, looked even softer, even seeming younger than he had 7 years ago. While the uncle was being confined by Hyeseyo, he was also being treated as a fugitive suspect. All because the deceased was Jong In-beom, who had once blackmailed Hyeseyo's mother. Jong In-beom had been released from prison for a major theft conviction just 1 month ago. Now the corpse had already been burned to a char. The real cause of death still had to wait for the autopsy results. Cha Taekyung had spoken with him on the phone shortly before his death. Not long after the incident, Cha Taekyung was confined by Hyeseyo, and the team leader in charge of this case just happened to be Cha Eun-sung. She heard the name Cha Taekyung and was clearly stunned for a moment. Who? The team member, completely confused, repeated it again. At this moment, Han Ji-won also rushed over, but was blocked outside and could only helplessly call out to Cha Eun-song. "I am Cha Taekyung's attorney." Taekyung didn't run away, he's missing. Cha Eun-song merely gave him a faint glance, then let the team member continue reporting. The distraught Han Jae-won went looking for Cha Taekyung like a madman. The phone always had the same message: temporarily unreachable. "Taekyung, where on earth are you?" At this time, in the quiet villa. Since things here aren't pleasant to look at, we'll just skip 10,000 words. It was late at night when the uncle finally woke up, and he didn't even know when he had fallen asleep. He suddenly realized that someone was hugging his waist from behind. "You're awake, aren't you? Move your hand away." Seeing that Hye-seo still didn't move, "Didn't you hear me? Move away." Hye-seo still didn't open her eyes. "Uncle, did you really think I brought you here to get revenge?" There was a pause, and Cha Taekyung also froze. "You think I did this because I hate you? So I want to torture you?" Cha Taekyung lowered his voice and asked in return, "If not, then what? Why are you doing this? Doing this won't make you happy either." Hye-seo stared straight at him. "It's very quiet here, isn't it? In woods like this, there's no noise and no lights, no matter what's happening outside. It's always just as quiet here. Sometimes it's so quiet it feels like another world. As soon as night falls, I can't tell whether I'm in this life or the next. That feeling is very comforting. It lets the restlessness in my heart slowly settle down. Sometimes, I too get swallowed up by that push-to-the-limit loneliness. In that moment, I feel like the world has shut me out, like a lost seed, blown by the wind into a desert that doesn't belong to me." "Uncle, have you ever felt that way?" That line from Hye-seo, "I want to be redeemed," made Cha Taekyung freeze up on the spot. That line from Hye-seo, "I want to be redeemed," made Cha Taekyung start. All this time, he had been sunk in his own preconceived notions about Hye-seo. Hye-seo explained very bluntly, "What I want isn't revenge. That kind of thing doesn't mean much to me. Before he could finish speaking, Hye-seo let go of him first. Just like that, he fell asleep in front of Uncle. Cha Taekyung's emotions were in turmoil as he stared at his sleeping face, his eyes still holding a trace of shock. But the nephew he had raised himself had locked him out of the bedroom. "You wander around outside every day, but you just don't go home." Uncle only fails to hide his expression when he feels guilty. Why so serious? He got up on instinct, wanting to call him back, but her foot slipped and her whole body fell straight to the ground.